Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 3 of Fire and Blood. In this dark, historical alternate universe, Naruto is the 5th son of Tajima Uchiha. Unlike his family, who are slowly falling victim to the Uchiha clan's infamous curse of hatred, Naruto relies on his charismatic charm and deadly skills to survive. Caught between his father's mad ambitions and Madara's escalating war against the Senju, Naruto must fight to save his family from their own dark destiny. Will his fire and blood be enough to rewrite history, or is the Uchiha clan doomed to fall into madness? This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Black Wolf 501, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 15. The Last Roar. Naruto stared at the man before him. It was hard to believe that this simple-looking old man who was probably in his early 50s ruled over the entire land of fire. He was thin and gaunt, with long black hair that were quickly turning white, but it were his dark green eyes that made Naruto a little uneasy. Lord Raiga Minamoto was one of the many feudal lords who had ruled over these lands for hundreds of years. There was a time when his family were just wealthy and influential merchants until their founding father, Lord Hayato Minamoto, started expanding his clout by forming alliances. From there was born the feudal monarchy that had ruled over both Uchiha and Senju for a very long time. Despite all their power and strength, neither great clan or their allies could muster as many fighters as the daimyo could. He had the largest standing army of the elemental nations, made up of 25,000 strong samurai, royal guards, shogun, many lesser-known clans and the royal family's elite forces. Neither Uchiha or Senju had enough forces to beat those numbers. Even if they allied together, their victory would be bittersweet, for they would almost be annihilated by the time the daimyo's last forces were defeated. It was why he had knelt before this man, so had all his supporters, and he had no doubt even the mighty Senjus would have had to do the same when they first arrived at the capital. Kyoto. It was the name of the capital and the ancestral seat of the royal family. Looking at the city, Naruto could not help but be impressed. It was a vast settlement protected by walls that were nearly 50 feet high and protected by seals created by the Uzumaki clan themselves that prevented any ninja forces from scaling the walls by using chakra. Everywhere he looked there were vast buildings and even larger markets. Thousands of people dressed in colorful clothing could be seen either taking a stroll, buying or selling wares, or entering the numerous whorehouses. Across the innermost districts resided the nobles and advisors of the royal family. And in the center of the city was the Grand Palace. Even from this distance Naruto could see its 7 magnificent towers and the grand castle where the daimyo addressed his court. It was said there were many beautiful gardens and lavish bathhouses inside the castle. It was also heavily protected by nearly 1,000 fighters that were always on duty. Not to mention the city's personal elite defense force that always patrolled the capital and its adjoining borders. It would have awed any other man, but it only filled Naruto with bitterness. His ancestors had ruled over the elemental nations. Hagoromo's rule was an era of peace where people truly prospered, and it would have continued had the sage not chosen to deprive his eldest son of his right as his heir. Indra had all the traits needed from a ruler, and as for his shortcomings the sage and Ashura could have chosen to help overcome them by supporting him. Yet mistakes were made, and the result of which was the fact that the descendants of those great men were now forced to bow before a simple merchant whose family had just been smart enough to use the ancient blood feud to their advantage. It was humiliating. Even the Senjus, who till this day considered it right that Ashura usurped his brother based on merit, were in turn the ones who also followed the tradition of the eldest son of the clan head becoming the next clan head. It was hypocrisy at its best. By right it should be the Uchiha ruling over the land of fire, with the Senjus acting as their supporting family, as it was truly meant to be. If that had happened, then it would not have been either Naruto or Hashirama bowing to a common merchant but the opposite. Still, it was a moot point now as he saw Hashirama approach towards him. Looking at the Senju clan head who also happened to be a former friend of Naruto's brother made the Uchiha feel a little conflicted. Hashirama was a tall and muscular man. His fighting prowess was legendary enough to even make Madara respect him, but it was his kind smile and easygoing nature which put Naruto on alarm. He would have believed those emotions to be actually genuine considering he had heard numerous tales of the Senju clan head actually being a kind and jovial man in reality as well. But after hearing what the Senjus did to all his aunts and uncles, what they did to this grandfather and grandmother, the suffering which Tajima and Naori went through, and the hole which was left in Naruto's heart because of the death of his brothers made him glare at the man. Lord Naruto addressed Hashirama and the daimyo at the same time, "Your Highness." Lord Senju greeted Naruto in return. His tone was curt and respectful, but the coldness in his heart did seep in just a little, making the two men nod hesitantly. It was that moment when Itama Senju chose to join his eldest brother and Naruto smirked on seeing the young Senju flinch at the sight of him. "I had hoped you would have provided a great challenge. Alas, I was sorely disappointed," said Naruto coolly, and was further elated when Itama lowered his head in shame for his defeat. The boy was so timid, it was actually a miracle he survived this long. Naruto had no doubt about the fact that if Itama had not been Hashirama's brother, the boy would have died a long time ago. There was no room for weakness in this cruel world. A fact Naruto had to bitterly learn from his own experiences. "So you are the young dragon. Coming from a family that proclaims themselves descendants of those great beasts, I find you quite disappointing as well. You even ride on a fox. Imagine a dragon on a fox," chastised a feminine voice with a mocking laugh. Despite his hatred for the Senjus, Naruto had to use every ounce of his power not to gape at the girl before him. She was almost as tall as him with magnificent golden blonde hair that shined brightly under the sun. Her skin was fairer than his own, her beauty rivaling those of almost every beautiful woman Naruto had ever met. But it was those hazel eyes that struck him. He knew those eyes, and he knew this woman. Tsunade Senju greeted Naruto cordially, and he didn't miss the fact that even if she smiled at his greeting, her eyes looked more murderous than most people Naruto had ever faced. "I looked for you on the battlefield," pointed Naruto, earning another icy stare. "You would have long been in your grave had I been there," retorted Tsunade darkly. Naruto knew a hothead when he saw one, and this girl was no different. From the corner of his eye he saw Naori and Makoto giving him reprimanding glares warning him not to cross a line. But the chance was too good to pass. "It's funny. Your brothers said something similar and look where they are now. One a prisoner and the other." "Well, I'd like Itama to answer that question," chipped Naruto sarcastically. "You're out of line, Kinslayer," spat Tsunade bitterly. Her hazel eyes now looked ready to kill. For his part, Naruto took the blatant insult with a dismissive smile even as he saw Hashirama, Itama, the daimyo and other nobles bristle in shock. "Many say you are the strongest kunoichi of this country. For some even the strongest in the elemental nations," suggested Naruto, and inwardly grinned when he saw Tsunade smirk. The stupid girl had walked right into his trap because the moment he finished that sentence Makoto snorted insultingly. "Now you have seen me," warned Tsunade, and was further infuriated when Naruto laughed. "I have. And I have to say, I'm not impressed," taunted Naruto, making a vein pop across Tsunade's temple. "Care to back your words with action?" challenged Tsunade, as she briefly cracked her knuckles, making many people flinch. "I knew Senju women were desperate for true men." Before he could finish the sentence he was forced to draw his sword as three Senjus lunged at him, followed by Tsunade herself. Naruto easily parried and deflected the sword of the first enemy before delivering a brutal elbow to the man's face that sent him crashing away. The remaining two came at him howling like stupid brutes, which only made it more easier for him to evade their attacks before disarming them easily. It was at this time Tsunade was about to lunge at him but was forced to stop when Hashirama got in the way. The Senju princess snarled furiously but calmed down on seeing the entire Uchiha force as well as her own people along with the daimyo's forces looked ready to fight. She glared murderously at the person who had provoked her to start this fight. Only now when it was too late did she realize that her mistake had costed her people because Naruto turned towards the daimyo. "Is this the hospitality you offer to your guests, Lord Raiga?" asked Naruto disappointedly, and was satisfied when the stern-looking man looked embarrassed for a change. "That was never our intention, and I assure you it shall never happen again. Lord Hashirama," directed Raiga seriously. Hashirama sighed knowing what was being asked of him, and since it was his own sister who started this mess by attacking Naruto, he had no other choice. He should have known Tsunade's feelings on the Uchiha and particularly on the man who humiliated her brothers, clan, and allies. She literally poked the dragon and the beast burned her to ashes. "Apologize, Tsunade," ordered Hashirama sternly, and didn't back down when she glared at him in disbelief. But now, despite the stern order, she saw the silent pleading in her brother's eyes. The message was clear for her to understand and one which she had to accept despite her desire to make the Kinslayer familiar with her punches. "Do it for Tobarama's sake. I apologize for my outburst," whispered Tsunade barely. She expected the Kinslayer to further taunt her for her mistake, but instead the Uchiha gave a curt nod before stepping closer to her even as Hashirama tensed. "I spared your life once. Insult my people again and I will see that you pay for your mistake," warned Naruto seriously. Tsunade's eyes widened as she remembered her first battle. She remembered being scared out of her wits, barely able to hold her weapon much less defend herself. All she had done that day was avoid getting killed by the older ninjas or even the ones of her own age. That was until she spotted someone whom she could take on. She had taken that chance only to fail and had watched that boy raise his sword. She had wet her pants as tears slipped from her eyes. She had been so terrified, weak and trembling. But the boy had stopped. He had looked at her and hadn't seen a Senju but a girl the same age as him whose only crime was being born into the enemy faction and given a sword forcefully to fight in a battle she was not prepared to handle. "It was you," said Tsunade in surprise. "What are you two talking about?" asked the daimyo curiously. But the way he asked that question didn't leave any room for Tsunade to lie or evade giving an answer. So, in the end she told the truth of the events of that day much to her own humiliation. She saw many of Naruto's followers were miffed that he spared Tsunade's life, and Tsunade's own people were miffed at that mercy which she was granted. But the person from whom she was expecting most gloating was strangely silent. For the first time, Hashirama saw Naruto in a different light. At the same time, it contradicted every available information he had received about the boy. Naruto had spared Tsunade's life for she had been just a child like him during their first battle. That showed a lot of compassion from an Uchiha who must have already endured watching many of his own clansmen, allies, even family die at Senju hands. Despite all that, Naruto didn't kill Hashirama's sister. Then how could the same person then kill his own clansmen years later with his own hands? Hashirama had a feeling Naruto could kill grown men and women, even teenagers, but he doubted the boy would be comfortable in killing children if his example with Tsunade was any proof. Yet he had even killed Uchiha children, which earned him the name Kinslayer. Yet years later during the conflict with the Fuma clan, Naruto had offered a chance of surrender to the last young ones of the Fuma clan. He had offered them protection if they chose to serve the Uchiha, but in the end the young ninjas chose to avenge all their kinsmen whom Naruto had already killed, losing their own lives in the process. It went to show that perhaps Hashirama didn't know everything about the boy. The Senju leader looked at their two sides and saw the tension was yet to subside, which did not bode well for their negotiations. Since it was Tobarama's life on the line, Hashirama decided to smooth things over as he beckoned one of his men to come forward. He was pleased on seeing Naruto's eyes going wide as he saw dawn brought before him. He saw all the joy, yearning and pride in the boy's eyes before they were replaced by skepticism. "What do you want from me, Lord Hashirama?" asked Naruto directly, much to the daimyo's chagrin since the man wanted this to happen inside closed rooms. But the two bitter clan had other ideas. "Peace," answered Hashirama looking the boy right in the eye. Naruto was stunned by that offer, and he was not the only one because both Uchihas and Senjus as well as their allies felt the same shock on hearing what Hashirama just revealed. "You think by giving me my sword that you can have peace? The last time an Uchiha leader offered your people the same, your grandfather slaughtered his family," accused Naruto bitterly, "or have you forgotten what your grandfather did to my brothers and sisters?" asked Naori icily. To his credit, despite the accusations, Hashirama didn't falter and looked at the two Uchiha seriously. I am not that man. I am Hashirama Senju. There was incredible strength inside this man, but more than that, Naruto saw honest and true conviction in those eyes. He made his intention even more clear by presenting Naruto his ancestral sword. The weapon which was Hashirama's only leverage if he wanted to save his brother. And if he was handing it out without any conditions, the man's siblings looked ready to revolt, and so did his supporters, but Hashirama ignored them all and looked at Naruto directly. Deciding to take a risk, Naruto stepped forward and grasped his own sword. Both of them were still holding on to Dawn and felt a spark pass through their bodies as the sword was still absorbing their chakra. They both smiled as in that subtle gesture they realized the scale of each other's power. Finally, Hashirama released his grip, allowing Naruto to fully take Dawn in his hands. A small breeze passed across the area as Naruto raised his weapon. Even the Senjus as well as the daimyo and his family saw Naruto practice a little with his beloved weapon. His movements were clean, precise and extremely fast. There was grace in his movements, but more than that there was something that felt right on seeing Naruto with Dawn. Finally, Naruto stopped and sheathed the sword on his hip, replacing his previous one by handing it to a nearby Uchiha. He then looked at Hashirama with an approving gaze. "You're a man of honor, Lord Hashirama." Nobody had expected Naruto to give out such a compliment. Tsunade's permanent scowl vanished on seeing no deception in Naruto's eyes. It would seem her brother had earned the Kinslayer's respect. In her opinion, it was a foolish move, but it was not her place to question her brother. However, it did make her worry more for Tobirama's life. The Uchihas were not a trustful lot, after all. But her opinion didn't matter because the daimyo seemed pleased that the hatchet was buried. For now, before she could join their party in the march to the daimyo's castle, she found a demonic pair of eyes staring down at her. Tsunade had been intimidated by the great fox that brought Naruto here on his back. It was said this same beast helped the Kinslayer in slaughtering the entire Fuma clan and had violently butchered any who tried to harm Naruto in any manner. In those eyes she saw grave intelligence and a stern warning. She had crossed a line today with Naruto, and if the menacing glare she got from the fox was any indication, she would have to do well not to do so again if she treasured her life. Tsunade quickly joined her brothers, making sure to avoid staring at the fox even remotely. Naruto sat in front of a table going through the 3 letters that had just arrived for him. 2 had been from his father and brother, informing him of the fact that the Uchiha army would be camping near the river in 2 days. Heeding his advice, his father had called their remaining reserve forces from their own clan and allies alike as a precautionary move. It made him feel a little relieved knowing that if something did go wrong, then his father and brother would have 10,000 strong ninjas backing them. Their enemies would know better than to openly challenge such a force. As for him and his party, they were still in danger inside the capital and were at the daimyo's mercy. Sure, the Fire Lord had been kind enough in providing grand rooms inside his castle to the Uchiha nobles and other clan heads, while the common soldiers were given barracks to reside in. Still, their entire party as well as those of the Senju were kept inside the castle where the daimyo's men could keep watch. It had barely been a few hours since he got here and already Naruto felt as if he was trapped in a prison. Shisui and the other Kinsguard had discreetly sneaked out of the castle on his instructions and gathered information regarding the city defenses, weaknesses, where and when the guards changed shifts, as well as how many men the Senjus had brought with them. He was surprised to discover Hashirama had brought merely 3,000 of his forces with him to the capital, and they were all currently inside the city. It was a cause of concern for Naruto because his forces inside the city were outnumbered, and should the daimyo side with the Senjus, then he was truly done for. Still, he placed aside the letters from his family and stared at the last one that bore a seal that made his eyes go wide. He looked across his room and was relieved to see Makoto soundly sleeping in his bed. She looked exhausted but happy, and he felt the same, certainly after their rigorous activity in the sheets for 3 hours. He had to admit, there was so much to sex he never knew before, and with every encounter he learned more and more. Most of all, he didn't regret going forward with her even if their future was not uncertain. What he did know was the fact that once this affair at the capital was done with, he was going to ask Tajima's permission to marry her. It was true that he still didn't know if he truly loved her or not, But he did have feelings for her which would always be more than he would ever have for whatever noble girl his father chose for him. Now that he was claimed back by Tajima, it won't be long before Tajima tried to use that to get him married to an Uchiha or one of their allies' daughters to strengthen their bonds. Tajima may love him, but the old man was always a clan head first and father later. Still, Naruto felt he had a good chance of making his wish be accepted because of two reasons. The first being if he succeeded at the capital and his past victories would present a meritorious claim, and the other reason was the fact that Naruto was Tajima's youngest son. It was Madara who would inherit everything while all Naruto could hope to gain were a few lands and maybe command his brother's army. Those prospects would not appeal to many clan heads to marry their daughters to such a second-rated man. As for Naruto, he didn't mind any of that because he was happy with his freedom. He then decided to focus back on the letter and hesitantly broke the seal. Casting one last glance at Makoto, he then raised the paper and the message changed his world. Dear Naruto, I know I promised that I wouldn't interfere in your personal life, but this is something that you needed to know. I'm pregnant. The medics confirmed it a few days ago. The head nurse says they could most probably be twin girls. But I cannot say for certain. What I do know is the fact that I saw you in my dreams again. I know you do not believe in prophecies or my visions, but I saw what I saw. A shadow looming near a great beast. Whatever it was, I dare say you'll see it soon enough. There is no need for you to visit me or even acknowledge these children. But I will never stop you from visiting them because they are your blood. If they are boys, then you must take them with you because I cannot keep them with me despite my wish. If they are girls, then the law demands that I keep them with me. But I know how much you desire a family of your own, and if we have girls or boys, then I want them to know their father. If you wish it, I can arrange for you to take them with you on the condition that they be acknowledged as your legitimate children and be loved. I shall also be allowed to visit them and vice versa whenever desired. Please remember the 3 instances I told you about where your choices will determine not just your future but that of this world. And be safe. It would be nice to see you again. Yours, Priestess Shizuka. Naruto quickly set the letter on fire and tossed it in the nearby dustbin, waiting till the moment it was completely destroyed. Only then did he sink into his chair and numbly stared at his own reflection in the nearby mirror. A father. He had wished for it so badly all these years. In the eyes of many, he was nearly an adult now since ninjas in this age didn't live well beyond even 20 years of age. Few lucky ones managed to live till 30 years. His father was one of the men who survived even more than that. But considering Naruto's own life and the endless conflicts he was always involved in, his survival was never certain. And now he had something to live for, something more to fight for. Fear coursed through his heart on imagining if he would ever be able to be the father a child really needed. And Shizuka was saying he might just have to. The storm it would create in his family and his own reputation were enough warnings that made him dismiss the idea of acknowledging them. At least right now. If they were girls, then Shizuka would look after them and he would visit them regularly. But if it were boys, he massaged his forehead knowing it was good and bad at the same time if Shizuka gave him twin sons instead of daughters. The Uchiha clan would never allow boys in their midst, which would force Naruto to take them or give them to someone who could look after them. Either option was disastrous for Naruto. Madara was supposed to be the next leader. Only if he died or was rendered incapacitated could Naruto rise to leadership. But if by some tragedy all 3, Tajima, Madara and Naruto were killed, then even so the Uchiha clan will have male heirs that could resume leadership in the future with Nauri training them. So, he made his decision. If they were boys, then he would take them with him rather than leave them as orphans or on someone else's mercy. Tajima could throw a hissy fit, but the old man knew the benefit of having spare heirs to maintain their family's leadership over the Uchiha clan. Even if they were girls, Naruto would acknowledge them as his own and be a part of their upbringing. If they desired to join the Uchiha, then no matter who opposed him, Naruto would get them under his roof. He suddenly paused. He had always been protective of his family, but this feeling burning inside his chest so brightly was entirely different. Love. Those children were not even born yet, and from this moment he felt a bond forming with them. They were his. A lone tear slipped from his eye and he smiled, for his impulsive decision of spiting his father might just have given him the most important gift of his life. He had to visit Shizuka after settling the affairs here at the capital once and for all. He had to see if she was being properly taken care of, if she was eating right, and provide any help she needed from him. She was one of the few people who had never judged him because of his dark past, and she was going to be the mother of his children. He was bonded to her for life now and he didn't regret it. Together, they had created something good and priceless. He remembered his own mother didn't survive giving birth to him and it made him clench his fists. He never wanted his children to grow up without a mother, he never wanted them to grow up under a distant father. They deserved every happiness in life which Naruto never got, and for that he was willing to sacrifice anything. But for now, he had an entire different matter to solve by tomorrow. He looked at the sky and saw the sun setting. They were expected for dinner with the royal family in an hour. Still, he wanted to get some sleep and if possible dream over what his children might look like. Would they resemble him or their mother? Would they be more like him or her? So many questions, so many possibilities, so many fears. He knew he would go mad if he continued thinking over this matter, so he quietly sneaked into the bed and snuggled himself towards Makoto, who, sensing the warmth, wrapped herself around him without protest. With a smile on his face, Naruto went off to a peaceful sleep. Naori curiously stared at her nephew as they both walked side by side towards the dining hall where they would be feasting with the royal court and the Senjus. She had known the boy enough to realize when he was happy or sad, and right now he looked to be over the moon. "You look quite pleased," said Naori with a wry smile. "I am," he admitted easily, and patted Dawn at his hip. Gods knew the boy loved that sword, but she knew getting it back couldn't be enough for Naruto to look so happy. She then saw the way he absently skipped his step in excitement and she grinned at him. "So you and Makoto finally got together, I see," Naruto faltered, making his aunt chuckle. His cheeks flushed and he felt like a child being caught stealing something. Naori was grinning at him victoriously and he knew her enough to know that lying was not an option. "I want to marry her," he confessed, and saw her raise her eyebrows in surprise. "So soon? Why don't you two take it slowly?" suggested Naori, but he shook his head in denial. "I'd rather not, or else father would find some ugly-ass bride for me as punishment," said Naruto hesitantly. "Why would Tajima do that?" "You have always made him proud," countered Naori, and saw the boy bite his lips. "You know about her past. She's not worthy to marry into our family in father's eyes," pointed Naruto. "Maybe. But if you want it to happen, it shall happen," she promised, making him stare at her curiously. "How?" The gentle smile he received from her made his heart nearly melt. The love she had for him clearly reflected in her eyes as she touched his cheek with her hand. "Leave Tajima to me," she suggested, as his eyes widened slightly. "You'd do that for me?" Naori came forward and laid a tender kiss on his forehead, making him blush, but he still looked in her eyes. "I love you, Naruto." He knew that she had felt that emotion towards him from the moment they met again after Izuna's death. From then, there was no going back and they had grown closer and closer every day. She had stood by him, supported him, guided him, looked after him in every tiny subject of his life. He knew his father and brother loved him, so did Makoto. But it was she who said those priceless words to him. The first person to ever say that to him. It all felt like a blur to him, and the next thing he knew was that he had her in his arms in a fierce embrace. There was a time when she was taller than him, but it had long since passed. Now he was taller and more broader than her, enough to make her melt in his embrace. He could not say anything and she didn't need to hear it because his choked breath was all she needed to know. He relaxed when she hugged him back by wrapping her arms around his back and placing a motherly kiss at the side of his head. When they finally broke apart, she just smiled at him before beckoning they resumed their walk. She moved forward but stopped when she discovered her nephew was not following. Turning back, she stared at him and saw him staring at her with a look she couldn't understand. "I love you too," he whispered. A lone tear fell from her eyes as she moved forward to embrace him again. She had known how he felt for her. For him she was his mother in all but blood, but they treated each other as good friends. Naruto loved his family with all his heart, but there were only two people he had loved more than anything or anyone. She was one of them. They finally parted and composed themselves, even if their hearts were full of joy. They maintained a dignified silence as they entered the hall and saw Tobi Shimura and Rei Namikaze waiting for them. Together the group of four walked towards the head table where the daimyo and his sons got up to greet them. The royal family was seated at the center of the table, while the senjus sat on the left side. The Uchiha faction was provided seat on the right side of the vast table. Naruto became oblivious to the pleasantries and small talk being exchanged among the people. He did his part here and there, contributing little to the talks as Naori took the lead. She was so smooth and graceful in the way she talked. Even the daimyo's 3 sons seemed entranced by her. However, his eyes were fixed on a beautiful but deadly woman who was staring at him quite keenly. Tsunade's gaze could be considered borderline impolite, but he didn't back down and looked at her calmly. They both were forced to break away from their staring match when the daimyo called for their attention. "I want you all to stop this unending war of yours and broker peace among yourselves," said Raiga seriously, and was soon backed by Hashirama himself. "We want you to return Tobirama to us unharmed. In return we shall relinquish all claim nor start any conflict with the Hitaki or Yamanaka clan," said Hashirama honestly. Naruto knew enough about politics to realize there was always a downside to any offer that looked too generous. "I'm sensing you want something more," said Naori expectantly, her gaze narrowing sharply, which made Hashirama grimace as he looked at the Uchiha matriarch, then at Naruto, followed by Tsunade. "I do," confirmed Hashirama. Before anyone could question further, the daimyo called the attention to himself, making everyone stare at him. "It is I who suggested this solution to Hashirama in the first place and would like to see it fulfilled. Your conflicts leave my lands damaged and cause great loss of life. All of this affects the livelihood of my subjects and has a direct impact on the security and economy of this nation. More than that, I have received an urgent distress call from the Uzumaki clan." "Revealed Raiga, the Uzumaki?" asked Naruto curiously, earning a nod from the daimyo's eldest son, Shinji Minamoto. "They are our distant allies, just as they are of the Senjus. They give us many good goods and play a large share in our trade. They also helped us build this city's defenses. Recently, they have spotted several ships circling around their borders at sea," answered Shinji, causing Naruto to frown. "The mountain clans from the land of lightning? They don't often venture so far from their lands, and aren't they embroiled in civil wars with rival factions? Even their daimyo and his family were exterminated a few years back," pointed Naruto, looking directly at the fire daimyo, who narrowed his eyes at him for that hidden message. Naori placed a hand on Naruto's knee, which made him shut his mouth instantly. Fortunately, the daimyo either ignored the veiled threat or had more pressing matters to discuss. "That's just it. The mountain clans have disappeared, so have most of the other clans in that nation. Our spies have heard nothing from that nation in months except silence," revealed Raiga gravely. Naruto furrowed his brows in concentration. "The Uzumaki lived in the land of whirlpools and also controlled the land of water, both of which were the easternmost outposts of human settlement. More than that, they were the furthest allies the land of fire had in the elemental nations. The only rival those redheads had were those factions from the land of lightning who irregularly raided their lands. If it was not the mountain clans probing the Uzumaki, then someone else was. The Uzumaki were vital allies of the daimyo and the Senjus, but they barely had any relation with the Uchiha except for mutual trade, and even that was restricted to common items found in any other markets. Something is brewing out there which poses a threat to us all. If they are coming for the Uzumaki now, sooner or later they will come for us as well. We need to stand united to face that threat, and we cannot do that if you keep on fighting amongst each other," spat Ken Minamoto insultingly. The second son of the daimyo was a short man but had the balls to say such a thing. "Old blood feuds don't die easily, Lord Ken," warned Naruto icily. His eyes glared so hard that the man flinched and looked away. "Do you think our enemies care whether you are Uchiha or Senju? The land of fire is the largest and most powerful nation in this world. Everybody wants what we have. And when they come for us they will kill every Uchiha and Senju who try to get in their way," advised Shinzo Minamoto, the third son of the daimyo. The man's tone was calm and respectful, but Naruto saw the urgency present in his eyes. "Our war cannot be settled by words, Lord Raiga. It can be delayed to deal with this threat, but unless the Senjus accept our rule there can be no peace. Indra Uchiha was the rightful heir and he was usurped. We will not rest until what he sought for our people is achieved. It may take 5, 10, or even thousands of years, but we shall have it," declared Naori boldly. Naruto had to admire his aunt's courage. To say something like that directly the daimyo himself and with such a fierce gaze was not something even he could imagine pulling off. The daimyo's family didn't look pleased and the Senjus looked ready to explode. So much for negotiations. You're right. Words don't settle wars, but marriages do. Naruto and Tsunade both froze at the same time as the daimyo looked at them pointedly before announcing, I, Raiga Minamoto, daimyo of the Land of Fire, hereby announce a marriage pact between the Uchiha and Senju clan. Chapter 16. Winds of Change. Tajima sat in his tent that was located in the center of their army camp situated near the river. It was barely a 2 hours journey that could allow his 10,000-strong army to reach the capital and raze it to the ground. After reading what he had, his heart wanted nothing more than to burn the city and all its residents to ashes. In front of him, Madara looked about to ready to explode, and with good reason, because under the pretense of simple negotiations, the Senjus had strong-armed them with the daimyo's help. He looked at his only sister and couldn't help but feel more sorry for her and his own son as well. On the daimyo's suggestion, Hashirama has agreed to marry Tsunade Senju to Naruto. The daimyo wanted the girl to marry Madara to keep this peace unbreakable since he would be the Uchiha leader in the future, but Hashirama somehow managed to prevent that. That's a good thing because Madara is not relationship material, said Naori with an amused snort. She grimaced when neither her brother or nephew laughed because they saw right through her facade. In return, they want you to marry Hashirama, pointed Tajima bitterly. Not only was Naori quite a few years older than the Senju boy who claimed himself as a clan head, but Tajima would rather marry a street urchin himself rather than pawn off his dear sister to those monsters. She was his last sibling, and after his wife he had loved her more than he had ever loved either of his sons combined. She must have seen his feelings clearly as she came forward and laid a hand on his shoulder. They know how much we mean to each other, and it will guarantee that Tsunade will remain safe until I remain the same. The daimyo has also proposed building a military village on his expense where our two clans and allies shall reside in a few years. All factions shall receive work from the royal court, and in return we swear fealty to the royal family. Every clan, emphasized Naori patiently. We will not bend, said Madara darkly, receiving a sharp look from his aunt. What happens to things that don't bend, Madara? Before the boy could answer, it was Tajima who cut him off with a stern glance. What are you implying? Asked Tajima seriously, knowing there was more to this mess. Naori sighed but came forward with the truth nonetheless. If we refuse this offer, we are going to be charged with treason. The daimyo has threatened to call his armies and ally himself with the Senjus. Together they will butcher us till there is not a single one of us or our supporters left. The sheer hatred that arrived in Tajima's eyes was enough to make his sister gulp. Her brother had never forgiven the Senjus for what they did to his family, and if he went forward with this, then the sister he loved more than anyone else would be held as a hostage for the rest of her life. The revenge he had been waiting for his entire life was about to snatched right out of his hands. They have already sent us a warning message, said Tajima furiously, and watched as Madara stepped forward. They prevented my brother from approaching us to explain this offer and instead only sent my aunt. They might have tried to hide their deception behind colorful words, but I know they are holding my brother hostage. Even if he was comfortably living in the palace, his life is in danger. Father, give me the men and I will put an end to this once and for all, requested Madara, determination and anger burning brightly in his dark eyes. Madara. Naori's attempt to calm him down only earned her a fierce stare from the boy. But behind that anger and hatred, she also saw something she had never expected to see from Madara so openly. Altiste for her. I will not sell my family. Despite the situation, both Tajima and Naori were proud to hear those words from Madara. They knew he was not as refined or cunning as Naruto, but he had an invaluable quality. Madara was loyal to his family, his clan, his allies, and he would defend them to the death no matter the odds. Madara, you are proposing we rise in open rebellion against the Fire Shadow himself? Asked Tajima seriously, wanting to be absolutely sure that this was not some outburst by the boy out of anger. Both elders stared at the young Uchiha as he silently contemplated that question. It took him a few long moments, and in that time both elders saw what they needed to say and they knew Madara's answer before the boy even said it out loud. Yes. Tajima got up from his chair and walked towards his son as his sister did the same. They both stepped around the boy and all three looked at each other. Our best bet is to storm the capital and eliminate the royal family. If possible, take Hashirama and his family hostage, If we can achieve that, then the Senjus and their allies will bend the knee, suggested Naori. Madara, don't forget what the daimyo has done in the past to ninja clans that have opposed him, warned Tajima. He burned their homes, butchered their men, raped the women, and slit the children's throats, recalled Madara grimly. Aware of what Raiga Minamoto was capable of in his younger days, and the years past had not made the man any kinder. He didn't have the men needed for a complete victory, but if he accepted this deal, then there would never be any hope for the Uchihas again. They would forever be enslaved to a common merchant and be forced to play nice with an enemy they had battled for thousands of years. But still, it is better to die on our feet than to forget who we are, said Madara honestly, and saw Naori stare at him worriedly. If you lose, your father dies, your brother dies, your people die, we all die, warned Naori gravely, earning a grim nod from her brother as well. Madara looked at his father, and even if he didn't say it, he saw his father would support whatever choice he made. Tajima knew their chances were slim, but they had no choice but to fight. The other option was even worse than being defeated by Senjus in battle. Madara knew that if he did this, then it was he and his brother who would lead their armies. Their people would look up to them, more towards Madara because they considered him invincible. Going up against Hashirama and the Senjus was one challenge, going up against the Senjus and the daimyo both was suicide. Fortunately, Madara had not been sane enough to begin with, which made him grin wolfishly. Well, that makes it simple then. Tajima and Naori could only grin at that statement, for they had expected nothing less from Madara. Capital, Shisui and the other members of the Kinsguard watched Naruto demolish his own shadow clones in brutal combat. His anger was clear for all of them to see. They all had heard Tsunade's outrageous scream across the entire castle after what was proposed, but on the other hand Naruto had gone deathly silent. Unlike the Senju princess, he was never prone to overtly display his emotions for all to see and decided to channel his anger in a productive manner. Makoto worriedly stared at the man she loved and felt helpless on seeing him go through this suffering. Her only consolation was the fact that Naruto was opposed to this marriage even more than her. It threatened to destroy all their plans for their future, and not just the Uchihas. Still, even she could understand the Uchihas didn't have many options. Their group had already sealed off this training area from any intruders and placed silencing seals that would prevent anyone from eavesdropping. Not that they needed to, because Naruto was in no mood to talk. They watched him battle against his army of clones for an entire hour and only stopped when the last one died by his sword. He was panting harshly with his entire body covered in sweat, but his anger was yet to subside even a little. However, that didn't stop any of them from approaching their friend and leader. What are we going to do? Nobody was more thankful to Itachi for his direct approach now more than ever, for neither Naruto or any of them were willing to go through any pleasantries or fake reassurances. Naruto didn't answer at first, lost in his own thoughts, but a light cough from Kagami made him finally look at his friends. I know what my brother will do, whispered Naruto. Rebellion? Itachi's accurate assessment was met with a grim nod by Naruto, and knowing him, Naruto would follow Madara to hell itself. If Madara chose war, the Uchihas and Naruto would back him until their dying breath. The consequences be damned. None of them missed how worried Naruto was. This could be the event that would either shape the Uchiha's future or destroy it altogether. All of them had always looked at him for leadership, but today he needed them. Fortunately, Shisui had always came through for Naruto more than the other Kinsguard members. So, when he stepped forward, Naruto looked at his best friend with hope in his eyes. The way I see it, our only chance at victory is taking the capital and eliminating the royal family. Our army has more men than what the Senjus and daimyo have inside the capital. If we take this city before the daimyo can call for his armies from across the country, then we can win, suggested Shisui. How can we do that? Asked Naruto curiously. We have Tobirama, whom we can use as hostage to make the Senjus back down and retreat from the capital. But it is not a sure bet, so I suggest we take another one of them as our prisoner, suggested Itachi. Who? Questioned Takeshi seriously, already willing to go ahead with this plan. Tsunade or Kawurama, whichever idiot is easy. The girl's a hothead and the boy a weakling. If we have more than one of Hashirama's siblings as hostage, then he will be forced to run away from the capital and leave the daimyo behind. We can then take the city, implied Itachi. There is one problem. How do we allow our armies to rush in? The walls are chakra-proof. The gates are even stronger, and breaking through those seals will take a lot of time, which would allow the daimyo time to call for his armies. If that happens, then we will be surrounded from both sides waiting to be butchered, warned Kagami. Shisui and Itachi glanced at each other knowingly, something which was not missed by the others. Those two boys had always been the sharpest among their group, and it seemed they had even thought of this problem. The daimyo has nearly 4,000 soldiers in this city, all of whom will be on guard until we submit to the offer. They are on high alert right now and will notice immediately if we make any move. That is not even counting the 3,000 Senju forces inside the city. If Madara wants to take this city, then we cannot do it with brutal force alone, advised Itachi. Then what do you propose? Asked Naruto hesitantly. The only way the city will be unprepared for a surprise attack will be in the event of the wedding actually taking place. I am not saying you have to go through with it, but if our enemies are busy enjoying the celebrations, so will the soldiers and the civilians. They will believe they have broken us, and that is when we will strike, proposed Itachi seriously. What's the plan? Asked Kagami and Makoto in unison. Naruto and everyone listened as both Itachi and Shisui explained their action plan to them. It was bold and extremely risky, with a good chance of them all ending up dead before Madara even breached the city gates with his army. There was also another problem. If the wedding was actually happening, then it was expected of Tajima and Madara to attend it. Same was the case for all the other clan heads of the Uchiha faction. No amount of excuses would suffice for their absence, and it might just give the plan away entirely. Still, both Shisui and Itachi expressed faith in their group and the 500 fighters their faction had brought to the capital. They didn't have to capture the entire city, but only accomplish few key objectives with precision and speed. There would be no room for error because the punishment was death. By the time the two boys finished explaining the plan, every Kinsguard was on board. They all knew what the risks were, and they knew the consequences of their actions. But they were all good and loyal fighters and were willing to support their clan from forever submitting to the clutches of an abusive daimyo who was forcing his power down their throats. Today, it was this marriage. Tomorrow, it would fighting the daimyo's wars for him with other smaller nations, or just doing his dirty jobs so that his family could remain in power. And it would only keep on getting worse and worse until the Uchihas forgot who they were. If the Senjus wanted to bow to such a man, they were free to do so, but the dragons were not going to. Shisui saw Naruto's hands were shaking, a phenomenon which had never happened before. Are you afraid? Asked Shisui seriously, looking at all his friends. Naruto nodded and was relieved to see similar expressions visible on the faces of his remaining friends as they all looked at Shisui, who nodded at them approvingly. Good, because then we all know what's at stake. Naruto walked through the small training area inside the castle and was pleased to find his friend sleeping under a tree. It had taken great persuasion to even get the daimyo to allow Kurama inside his home. But he somehow managed to convince the man, because knowing that his friend was near gave him some confidence. Still, he was nervous for the first time in his life with his friend. The beast was staring at him as he approached, its calculative demonic eyes following his every move and reaction. When he finally stepped before Kurama, the fox said only 4 words. You're going to war. After all the years they had spent beside each other, Naruto was not even surprised of the fact that his friend realized his thoughts without him ever saying it. There was no use denying what Kurama just said, and he had never lied to his friend before. He was not going to start now. Yes, he confessed honestly, making the beast sigh. Would it be too bad if you accepted this offer? I know it's not perfect. Kurama abruptly stopped speaking when he noticed something different in Naruto's eyes. He looked closely at his friend and saw he was not doing this out of spite or vengeance. The boy honestly believed he had no choice. Will you fight with me? Asked Naruto seriously, making the fox clench its jaw. I loved Ashura too, you know. His children are as much my family as you are mine. If I do this, then I am agreeing to be a part of slaughtering an entire half of the family of a man who gave me life, confessed Kurama. Somewhere in his heart Naruto had always known Kurama didn't share the hatred for Senjus that Naruto had. The fox was certainly not sympathetic to them, but it didn't mean he wanted to kill them all. My family will not bow to this daimyo who is abusing his power, said Naruto honestly, earning a snort from the fox. And you think your people will not do the same if they win? No, they'll do worse. You'll kill the Senjus to the last child, replied Kurama furiously. Naruto wanted to refuse that accusation, but knowing his family, especially his brother and all they had went through, he knew they were going to kill every last Senju, even if it meant extermination of the Uchihas themselves. There was no victory here but only death and suffering. Your clan and all your supporters will die or get decimated brutally even if you somehow win. You will have your revenge, but there will be no one left to share that satisfaction with," warned Kurama, and remained calm when the boy growled furiously. "What do you want me to do? My family is going to war, I know it. And I cannot stand back and let them die. They have been there for me all my life. Most of all, I swore a vow to defend my people no matter what. I am not going back on my word even if it means my death," answered Naruto bitterly, his fists clenching shut. "Tell me something." Naruto paused when he heard the grave voice of his friend, and when he looked into those eyes he saw Kurama was worried. Something which had never happened before. "Do you want to kill all the Senjus? I want Tobirama to die and the Senjus to pay for what they did to my brothers," said Naruto angrily. "That is not the answer to my question," reminded Kurama patiently. Naruto paused and intensely stared at his friend, who looked back at him without a flinch. Somehow, the beast knew what was in Naruto's heart and he was forcing him to say it out loud. "If they bend the knee, I will accept their surrender and put an end to this war," confessed Naruto. "Why?" demanded Kurama, wanting to be absolutely sure that the boy knew what he was getting into. "I know what war has taken from my family. Truthfully, if Uchiha and Senju fight like Madara and my father want them to, then we both shall be decimated. I want to end this war, but I will not betray my family, my liege lord, and my brother for that. I will make Madara see reason so that he doesn't kill all the Senjus. He will listen to me," argued Naruto. Kurama did not share the boy's confidence. Naruto was a good person, but he had a great weakness: loyalty. It was that same loyalty that made him become a Kinslayer, the same one that kept him fighting for the Uchihas despite all the hatred and scorn he faced, and the same loyalty that would make him fight for Madara in this bloody war. "Your loyalty will kill you someday, Naruto," said Kurama sadly. "I know," agreed Naruto with a melancholic smile arriving on his lips. Kurama's heart wept for the one friend he had gained in such a long time. Naruto had never asked him for anything, defended him even when there was no need. Most of all, he had given Kurama respect. When he looked in the boy's eyes, he knew that the boy was well aware of what was going to happen. Naruto was going to die. The Uchihas, for all their power, did not have the numbers to defeat the daimyo and Senjus both. Most of all, if Madara assaulted the city, then Naruto would be the first to die. The boy was strong, but he was surrounded by thousands of enemy fighters, not to mention Hashirama himself. His death would be swift and brutal, which would only cause Madara to go mad with grief and destroy any chance of peace between the two clans. Why did his only friend have to be an Uchiha? "I will not force you to fight for me," promised Naruto. Kurama could only growl in frustration. They both knew the fox could not watch his only friend die no matter the reason. "But if you don't, then I want you to do something for me," requested Naruto, making Kurama stare at him curiously. "What is it?" asked the fox. "You remember Shizuka?" Kurama nodded at that question and saw a pained yet happy look arrive in his friend's eyes. "Even if the tree burns, one branch shall survive." Kurama's eyes widened as he understood what Naruto was truly implying. The boy was going to be a father. "Look after them," whispered Naruto pleadingly. With one last smile, Naruto turned around and started walking away. Kurama felt a lump in his throat and his vision suddenly felt blurry. His heart threatened to drown in grief on watching his only friend march to his death. What made it worse that Naruto knew he was probably going to die. Damn those Uchiha. "Wait!" Naruto stopped and turned around as the fox came walking towards him. There was a fire in the beast's eyes, one full of love and determination which touched Naruto's heart. "I will fight for you. But on two conditions," said Kurama seriously. Naruto gulped. Kurama was more powerful than the entire Uchiha army combined. If the fox supported him, then taking this city would be a lot easier than before. With Kurama, he could actually take on Hashirama. But he also saw the beast wanted something from him in return for this invaluable help. "I'm listening. You will marry Tsunade Senju." Naruto was about to explode when one murderous glare from Kurama made him restrain himself. He still glared at his friend furiously. The fox knew how much he despised this decision and he was forcing Naruto to make it regardless. And you will convince Madara to spare the Senjus and their allies if they surrender. That includes Hashirama's entire family, including Tobirama. Promise me that on your honor, demanded Kurama seriously. Kurama had never seen Naruto look at him so furiously, but he didn't back down from that fight. He loved this boy and could not let him die, but at the same time he had promised the sage that he would look after his family. Both families. If those two morons wanted to fight, then Kurama had to make sure the fools didn't kill each other. Gods, this generation was as worse as Indra and Ashura. But then again, he should have expected this. Their war had gone on for thousands of years, and unless one was defeated or bent the knee, it was not going to end no matter what. The best Kurama could do was save these two stupid clans from total annihilation. He knew that meant that he would have to kill Senjus, which would take a toll on his consciousness. It was not a small sacrifice, and the boy knew it. At the same time, the beast had asked something equally priceless from the boy. Letting go of his revenge. And accepting a hated enemy as his wife. For the first time, Shizuka's words came back to haunt Naruto. There will be 3 instances in your life where you will have to make choices that will not only determine your future but that of the world. Naruto knew how important Kurama's support was. The beast could save the lives of hundreds of his people. But he would not fight unless he had those promises from Naruto. Both were against everything Naruto had ever wanted. Marrying Tsunade was like a bitter pill, but sparing Tobirama? It was like grabbing a dagger and stabbing himself in the heart. But if he didn't do this, then his family. I will marry her. Kurama felt relieved on hearing those words and ignored the raw fury in Naruto's eyes. The fox knew he was breaking the boy's heart, but someday he would thank him for it. And Tobirama? Questioned Kurama seriously, and saw Naruto literally shaking with fury. I will spare his life if he surrenders. Same goes for the rest of the Senjus, replied Naruto bitterly. Kurama knew what it must have taken from Naruto to make that last promise. It had literally been Naruto's only goal to avenge Izuna, but at the same time he wanted to keep his remaining family alive. If it meant letting go of his revenge, then he would do it. It was why Naruto was different from his clan. He shared many of their traits, but he was not totally consumed by his hatred. He could be made to see reason. But damn if Kurama had not utterly pissed off the boy, for never had the boy looked at him with so much bitterness present in his eyes. Naruto. Damn you for forcing me into this position. Kurama felt ashamed as his friend furiously walked away. There were times when they both were irritated with each other, but never had Naruto been disappointed in him. Seeing that look in his friend's eyes had hurt Kurama, and the fox knew he deserved it, for he had taken from Naruto the one thing he had desired most. If it was any other Uchiha, Kurama would never have believed their promise of letting go of revenge. But Naruto always kept his promises no matter what happened. Kurama hoped the boy would do so again. For in return, the fox was going to help the Uchihas. Something he had never imagined doing even in his wildest dreams. Tsunade had been sitting petulantly in one of the training grounds. Her attempt to make her brother back down from the marriage proposal hadn't worked. She had raged and screamed, threatened to rip his head off, but Hashirama had not backed down. He had looked at her with such a cold gaze and ordered her to do her duty towards their clan, just as he was doing his by marrying an Uchiha woman older than him, and one who hated him even more than Tsunade hated the Kinslayer. Thinking about that man made her heart fill with fear and disgust. Naruto Uchiha was a handsome man with a good humor. He was strong and powerful, had more sense than any other Uchiha she had ever seen. But it were the things he had done which she couldn't stand. He had killed his own people, men, women, even little children. She didn't care what reasons he had, but nothing could justify that massacre. Even if those who died were Uchiha, she could not help but loathe him for his cowardice. What kind of man did such a cruel thing to his own people? If Naruto was capable of such atrocities on his own, then she didn't need to be a genius to figure out what he would do to her. She knew he was smart enough not to hurt her physically, and she could take him on if he dared, but he wouldn't do it because it would endanger Naori, and from what she had seen between those two, Naruto actually cared about her. A lot, but it didn't mean he would stop himself from making her life a living hell. She would be surrounded by Uchiha, in the midst of a clan who hated her very guts, a husband who despised her, and a constant threat to her life for the rest of her days. She didn't know if she could handle that. She loved her clan, her family, but this was just too much. Hashirama was so desperate for peace that he was unable to see the dangers to this plan. The daimyo was all for it because he was the one who benefited most from this arrangement. That man didn't give a shit about Tsunade, Naruto, Hashirama, or Naori. He only cared about himself. Itama had also agreed with Hashirama much to her betrayal. It had gotten to a point where she couldn't even look at her brothers despite how much she loved them. Her only brother who would have thrashed this plan and beaten some sense into Hashirama was currently a prisoner of those bloody Uchihas. Silent tears fell from her eyes as she remembered her time with Tobirama. Her second eldest brother was not a man of many words and often preferred silence. But he had always looked after her. Tobirama had always been a realist unlike her other brothers. He knew there could be no peace with the Uchiha. Two swords could not exist together. It was Tobirama who had insisted that Tsunade stay back and not participate in the mission to retake the Yamanaka territories. She had been so angry at him for considering her weak and even called him selfish. But her brother had just stared at her calmly and told her it was too risky to send so many members of their family into one battle. And he was right, because if she had gone with him, there might have been a good chance they would be sharing the same cell together and Hashirama wouldn't be in such a good position to negotiate. Gods only knew what those red-eyed bastards had done to her brother. He was alive, that was for certain. But had they fed him properly? Tended to his wounds? Were they torturing him in different ways? For she knew there were means other than physical torture, and the Uchihas were expert in that. She missed her brother so much. Her tearful eyes caught sight of someone watching her from the nearby watchtower. Her gaze hardened as she recognized the man in golden armor. His eyes were sad, even more so than hers, and whatever anger he had was subdued behind a stoic face. She knew he was against this as much as her. Rumors were he had a mistress he loved dearly. Not only was she marrying a man she hated, but also someone who already loved another woman. It was the worst possible nightmare she could have ever dreamed of. So both helpless souls just stared at each other. Madara sat in the makeshift command tent surrounded by his father and aunt as well as all the lords and ladies of every allied clan. They were all in an uproar as Madara explained the daimyo's offer, or rather command, to them. He had not concealed anything from them and told them what his plan was. He even informed them about the military village that the daimyo wanted to build, which had caused another uproar among all the clans. They all served the fire shadow in one way or another, but if they accepted this, then they would be permanent slaves. Nobody could understand why the Senjus were so desperate to lose their independence to a common merchant proclaiming himself royalty. But the Uchihas and their allies were in no mood for such decision. Tajima had told them of their slim chances and what it could mean if they failed. The implications were disastrous. It had led to another lengthy discussion of searching other avenues, ranging from getting aid from the daimyo of another nation, hiring mercenaries, and many more. All of those options would take a lot of time, money, and resources. None of which the Uchihas had in abundance. The Uchihas and their allies had decent wealth, but nothing that could help them topple off the extremely rich daimyo and the well-to-do Senjus and their allies. All they had were 10,000 highly trained ninjas and Madara. They could still muster up another 5,000 to 6,000 fighters, but that force would be made up of very young children barely able to lift swords, crippled men and women, and even civilians from their lands. Against a trained army, that force would be decimated. Madara had vetoed that option solely for the fact that his brothers had been children when they were thrust into wars, and he would not allow any more of his people's children to die like his brothers had. But he also knew that if they lost, then those same children would be butchered. It made him steel. His resolve for failure was not an option. We should support the daimyo's brother. He has a lot of influence and can help us topple the pompous bastard. Proposed one of the Namikaze. He's a bigger cunt. Even Madara couldn't help but smirk on hearing that statement from one of his bannermen. It was true that the daimyo had other main and branch family members with influence who wanted to topple him. But they were just as bad and would sooner or later use the Uchihas even more pervasively. He was brought out of his musings when Tobi Shimura got up from his chair and walked towards the center. "My lords. Here's what I think about the royal family and the Senjus," said Tobi furiously before showing the middle finger, earning loud chuckles from the clan heads. Even Madara and Naori smiled, while Tajima remained silent. Madara looked at his most loyal bannerman and saw the man stare at him first before looking at the other clan heads. "We do not bow to our enemies. We do not kiss the ass of a bloody civilian, roared Toby, earning another loud approval from the clan heads. It was the dragons we bowed to. And the dragons are still here. Madara stiffened when he saw Toby unleash his sword and point it straight at him. There sits the only leader I will ever bow to. The first Hokage, yelled Toby passionately. The man knelt before Madara and placed his sword before the Uchiha boy. Tajima and Naori's eyes widened on hearing those words. Their stupefied faces watched as Madara got up from his chair as Rei Namikaze stepped forward. Both her and Toby had went to the capital with Naruto but were forced to go back to the camp on Naruto's orders as the boy had insisted they protect his aunt from any enemies hiding on the road. Now they were glad they had followed that order. Fuck the cunt of a daimyo. Fuck the craven Senjus. The first Hokage, declared Rei, as she unleashed her sword and knelt before Madara placing her weapon before him. Shin Aburame got up from his chair and stepped before Madara. Unlike the previous two clan heads, he was not so boisterous but his steely eyes looked at Madara. Despite their reserved nature, the Aburames made up a third of the Uchiha forces. The Aburame clan has followed you for years. We shall follow you to victory or death, pledged Shin quietly, before kneeling before Madara. Unlike the others he had no sword but the gesture was enough. Seiko Kurama unleashed her own sword and looked at Madara proudly, the first Hokage. Madara watched in silent fascination as the entire command tent erupted with loud cheers as every clan head rose up for him and knelt. He looked at his father and aunt, they both smiled at him and he could see they had placed their hopes in him. He looked at his bannermen, they were still shouting at the top of their voices. In their eyes he saw faith and loyalty, they believed in him. He stood taller and more straighter looking them all in the eye, assuring them that their faith in him was not misplaced and allowed the cheers to wash over him. The first Hokage. The first Hokage. The first Hokage. Chapter 17. The one who cared. He watched a couple of young children splashing and playfully laughing inside one of the swimming pools of the castle. Their laughter and bright smiles calmed down his anxious heart as he observed them from the top of one of the towers. Those eyes were full of so much joy, hope and innocence. None of them had any idea as to what the world was really like. Unlike the stories they were told, there were no heroes in real life. Only skilled monsters who killed each other one after another. In most cases without any just reason and only for the sake of killing. Watching these children couldn't help but make Naruto think about the thousands of other ones residing in this city. Not to forget the thousands of parents, mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles. These people couldn't fight a ninja army, had no say in the political rivalries of the royal court, but were the ones who suffered most because of it. Nobody cared about what happened to them. Not the daimyo, not the ninja clans or the soldiers. He knew perfectly well as to what would happen to these people if Madara came to the city. They would all burn. The men would be killed, the women raped or taken slaves and the children could only watch helplessly as their families and life were destroyed before their very eyes. The daimyo and his forces would fight back viciously. The Senjus will retaliate in full force making the Uchihas return the favor with thrice the passion. It would be a bloodbath of a monumental scale, and gods forbid if he had to unleash Kurama to save his clan. He knew what the beast was fully capable of. It could raise this city to ashes in 10 seconds and kill everyone in it. Even if Kurama tried to fight carefully, it would still not stop thousands of innocent civilians from getting caught in the crossfire. You've got that look in your eyes again. He turned sideways and was surprised to see his friend Itachi staring at him with his usual stoic and all-knowing gaze. Itachi had always been a man of few words, but he had an uncanny ability to understand people. Naruto was no exception. What look? Asked Naruto with an amused smile, as Itachi stepped beside him and observed the playing children. The look that says that I am about to do something incredibly brave or stupid, answered Itachi frankly. Naruto wryly smiled at that blunt statement. Itachi had never been one for mincing words. And his friend was not wrong, so he could not refute what he said or risk having to lie to him, something which Naruto didn't want. Our ancestors ruled the world. They taught the ninja arts, maintained peace across the lands until the war between Indra and Ashura broke out. Then everything changed. Whispered Naruto sadly. What are you saying? Asked Itachi curiously. Our people have always said that we are the rightful rulers of this world. That we were usurped, that all the clans and civilians should bow to us because we are superior. We have the royal blood in us, we have the power and mind to rule, but are we truly good rulers? In fact, I don't even know what a good ruler is, admitted Naruto worriedly. Itachi remained silent as he pondered over those honest words while staring at the playing children and then at the vast capital before them. Looking at it, he could finally understand what his friend was worried about. I think you already know the answer, Naruto, said Itachi with a small smile. I have to destroy something truly great. And I have to send thousands of innocents to their deaths. A good ruler would never do that to his people, said Naruto bitterly, clenching his fists around the stone wall of the tower. This is a time of war, my friend, pointed Itachi, but Naruto shook his head fiercely. Then how are we any better than the Senjus? If we do not care about the lives of our people but only about our rights alone, then the Uchiha are not fit to rule, said Naruto bitterly. That is the way of the world, said Itachi calmly, making Naruto snarl. Then it's bloody wrong, yelled Naruto furiously, his eyes ablaze with anger and shame. Itachi was stunned by that outburst. Looking into his friend's eyes, he realized Naruto didn't want to do this. He didn't want thousands to die just so his family could rule. It was the true way of gaining power. Their clan's words were fire and blood, but in Naruto's eyes he saw fear for the lives of all these people who could not defend themselves. Your compassion will kill you someday, Naruto. Naruto's anger subsided and a faint smile twitched across his lips, for he remembered Kurama saying the same thing about his loyalty. And they were not wrong, but still. Better to die as who I am than become something I am not. Itachi stared at his friend quite intensely. He had always known, despite his sarcastic humor and playful nature, there was a good heart deep inside this Uchiha. Naruto was not a perfect man and had many shortcomings, yet there was something within him that had made Itachi and many others believe in him. Now that he remembered the past years, Naruto had always fought for his clan, but at the same time he had also fought for the people of the Land of Fire. He and Shisui both believed in protecting the weak and innocent. They both believed in everything which any ninja would never do. You're going to do something, realized Itachi, and stared at his friend worriedly. Naruto simply nodded. May I know what that is? Asked Itachi hesitantly, making Naruto smile a little. Not if you want to save your ass from my brother. Itachi flinched. He was a fine warrior, but pissing off Madara was not something he wanted to do anytime soon. However, Naruto was the man's brother and had a few liberties Itachi didn't. I have to act on what my own heart is telling me to, even if I am not or will never be a ruler. And I have to do what is best for all our people, confessed Naruto. And if you fail? If war is truly inevitable? Questioned Itachi seriously, and saw Naruto's gaze harden, but he didn't look away from Itachi's piercing stare. Then I will do my duty as I always have. Hashirama Senju was having breakfast with his family in the early morning. The atmosphere was tense and awkward, something which had never happened before. His sister was not even looking at him and had not talked to him for an entire day. Itama had tried to make peace between his two siblings but had failed, resulting into him silently eating his food while casting hesitant glances at his two siblings. Hashirama himself knew it would take a long time before Tsunade got over her anger, still he had to try. Before he could finish calling her, there was a knock on their door. When he gave the permission to enter, one of his Senju guards stepped inside and bowed. The man had an apologetic look in his eyes for disturbing his leader's family at this early hour, but he did speak. My lord, the Kinslayer is here to see you, said the guard, and Hashirama didn't miss the disgust in the man's voice no matter how much he tried to hide it. His curiosity piqued. Send him in. The guard bowed before quickly walking out of the room, leaving Hashirama to wonder as to why Naruto was here. So far from what he had seen, the boy had a cocky and arrogant personality. Nothing unusual among Uchihas, but behind that facade lay a truly calculative and sharp man. The Senju had seen the intelligence in those eyes. While Madara was ruled by his emotions, his younger brother had more restraint. It still didn't cease to amaze him as to how magnificent the boy looked in his golden armor. That dragon sigil on his chest left no doubt as to who he was. The dark black cloak fluttering on his back as he walked gave him a contrasting look in comparison to his golden armor. The boy was handsome, but more than that, it were his eyes that always intrigued Hashirama. The Senju head saw Tsunade brutally stab her fork over her plate while Itama nervously clenched his fists. Before his sister could start her outburst and aggravate Naruto before he even began, Hashirama sent a warning glance at his sister. She held her silence but gave him a menacing glare in return. When Naruto finally stepped before them, Hashirama saw Dawn was now hanging on the boy's hip. Hashirama gave a curt but respectful nod to his visitor, receiving the same in return. "What brings you here, Naruto?" asked Hashirama curiously. "I just got word from my father and brother. They have accepted the offer and will arrive shortly with all the clan heads for the wedding," informed Naruto, with not a hint of emotion visible on his blank face. "Playing messenger now, are you? That's quite beneath you, Kinslayer," insulted Tsunade spitefully. Itama smacked his forehead in frustration and even Hashirama groaned at his sister's blatant attempt to rile up the Uchiha when all he was doing was giving them an important message. The only proof that Naruto even heard that insult was the slight twitch of his eyebrows, and that too was stopped when he noticed Hashirama stare at him apologetically. "I am not here to play childish games, princess," replied Naruto coldly, and saw a nasty scowl arrive on the beautiful woman's face. "Good, then get the hell out," spat Tsunade furiously. She flinched when Hashirama slammed his fist on the wooden table, nearly make it shatter. The fierce anger in her eldest brother's eyes made her gulp. "Silence," commanded Hashirama. Tsunade bit her lip in order to hold back another sharp reply. Her brother was a good and patient man, but there were times when she really pissed him off with her fiery temper. This was one of those times. "I apologize for her words, Lord Naruto," said Hashirama sincerely, and was intrigued when the boy shook his head. "Every person is responsible for their actions. You don't have to apologize for the deeds of your sister," refuted Naruto honestly. Tsunade clenched her fists at the audacity of this Uchiha. Who was he to preach such noble values when he had done so many despicable things in his life? But her eldest brother seemed quite impressed with Naruto's words, and remembering Hashirama's silent warning from before, she was forced to keep her silence. Hashirama gracefully allowed Naruto to take a seat, which the Uchiha did with slight hesitation. Before they could exchange any other pleasantries, Naruto got straight to the point. "This is a mistake, Lord Hashirama," warned Naruto. "Finally something we can agree upon," snorted Tsunade, making her brothers sigh. Hashirama ignored his sister, knowing how hopeless she was, and instead decided to listen to the most rational man in the room right now. "Why so?" he asked the boy, and saw a grim look arrive on the boy's face. "My people and our allies will never bow to a civilian who is strong arming us to become slaves," informed Naruto. "But you just said your people agreed to the offer," said Itama confusedly. Naruto pursed his lips and refused to say something. But he didn't have to, as Hashirama realized what the boy had not said out loud. "They are going to attack the city." Hashirama's stunned revelation made his siblings stiffen before they both looked at Naruto with such hostility and anger. But the unfazed boy simply sat in his chair and only stared at Hashirama. "I believe they will do just that," confirmed Naruto, making Hashirama grimace. "Why are you telling me this?" asked Hashirama with a hint of suspicion now seeping into his hardened voice. "I cannot allow the innocent people of this city to die for our feud. It was the daimyo who started this, your clan who supported it, and the Uchiha who will end it in fire and blood. These civilians and their families shouldn't die for our crimes," admitted Naruto plainly. "Don't listen to him, brother. This could be a trap," warned Itama hurriedly. "I knew the Uchiha were treacherous bastards. But I never knew your clan could stoop so low," said Tsunade furiously. Even in the face of those scathing insults and damning accusations, Hashirama noticed the boy never lost his cool for even a second. He simply glanced at Hashirama's siblings before looking at the Senju leader seriously. "Why do you desire peace so much, Lord Hashirama?" asked Naruto curiously. "Because there is only one result if our clans continue fighting. Annihilation of both sides, and it is something I don't want," confessed Hashirama honestly. To his surprise, Naruto accepted his answer with a curt but respectful nod. "I answered your question. Now I want you to answer one of mine," said Hashirama seriously. "Depends on the question," replied Naruto calmly, earning a tiny smirk from the Senju leader. "Why are your people refusing this peace offer?" Naruto's gaze hardened at that question, something which neither Hashirama or his family missed. "We are a proud clan, Lord Hashirama. We are not as rich or influential as you and your allies, but we are strong. Despite what you believe, fighting against the Senjus is a matter of honor for us because only your people can match our prowess. We hate your people but respect your power because you earned it, revealed Naruto. Hashirama took in all that information and tried to process it. Surprisingly, his younger brother realized the true meaning behind the Uchiha's revolt sooner than anyone else. But the daimyo has not earned that respect, has he? Questioned Itama knowingly, earning a surprised nod from Naruto, who had clearly not expected the shy Senju to figure out the real reason behind the revolt. You cannot win against the daimyo's army, much less against our side if we join him, warned Hashirama seriously, all playfulness gone from his eyes. I know, agreed Naruto in a resigned voice. Then why? Asked Hashirama in disbelief. You know why? Hashirama found himself cursing Madara for he could be the only one behind this suicidal move. The rest of the Uchiha family, including the likes of Tajima, Naori and Naruto, had far more sense than Madara. After hearing the underlying threat of annihilation if the Uchihas rejected the marriage offer, Madara's anger would have known no bounds. Hashirama had expected that from Madara, but to think even a shrewd man like Tajima would agree to this. It was then he realized the true reason behind this move. Pride. The Uchihas greatly valued their independence even if they paid taxes to the daimyo because it was very rare they had to do anything for the man. But if they agreed to this, then they would lose that independence and they would never accept that. He looked into Naruto's eyes and saw while he agreed with the sentiment, he knew it would only have one outcome for the Uchihas. And yet you'll fight knowing your people are making a wrong decision, said Hashirama disappointedly. It is not my place to make decisions. If my brother comes here and starts fighting, I will support him because he's my family, confessed Naruto. And yet if you're here then it could only mean you want to prevent that from happening, deduced Tsunade, earning a surprised glance from Naruto. She scoffed at him. Who did he thought she was? Some pretty face with no brains? His deadpan gaze was the answer to her internal question, which made her growl, earning a tiny smirk from him. That infuriating bastard. I'd like to avoid bloodshed if I can. I'll admit I didn't clearly think it would hurt your clan's pride, and for that I apologize. But make no mistake, if your clan makes any move against my people I will retaliate, warned Hashirama, his dark eyes boring into Naruto's very soul. The Uchiha stiffened a little on feeling the barest hint of Hashirama's killing intent. It was barely a warning, but Naruto's sensory powers clearly revealed to him the true extent of Hashirama's power. It was a humbling experience to say the least. He sighed in relief when that force vanished and Hashirama's hardened gaze softened if only a little. How do you propose we avoid this war? Questioned Hashirama. If you truly want peace with my people, then rather than make them bow by force, make them see something that you are truly sincere in your desire for peace, advised Naruto. How? Asked Itama curiously. There is no way my people will ever listen to the daimyo after what he did. Even if it kills them all, they will destroy that man and his family. It is not the most sensible thing, but it is what my people will do. If you help in smoothing that process without getting into any conflict with us, then it would go a long way to show the Uchiha your sincerity, explained Naruto patiently. You mean rebel against the daimyo? Said Hashirama knowingly, narrowing his eyes dangerous at the boy. At Naruto's nod of confirmation, Hashirama could only massage his forehead. What mess had he gotten himself into? It didn't stop Naruto from continuing. We are already inside the daimyo's castle. We have enough men if we combine our forces and take the royal family hostage. If that happens, the royal army will surrender and there will be no need for Madara to attack this city. As for my people not attacking yours after our victory, then I promise you I will make them back down, said Naruto honestly. And we are to take your word on that? Asked Itama in disbelief. Yes. Or else you would kill Tobirama, said Tsunade, bringing out the unsaid threat if the Senjus made any move to stop the Uchiha from going up against the daimyo. Very likely, admitted Naruto, much to the surprise of the three Senjus. Tsunade's gaze turned ice cold as she glared at the Uchiha. Then it's best if we have a prisoner of our own. We will join our forces with the daimyo, and knowing your brother, he will not attack as long as we hold you prisoner, said Tsunade darkly. She could only frown when Naruto stared at her amusedly. Trust me, if you try to attack me maybe you will succeed. But make no mistake, within minutes of that this city will burn to ashes, warned Naruto coldly. Hashirama racked his brain in order to figure out the real reason behind Naruto's claim. The boy had 500 strong fighters inside the city and they would defend him, but it was not enough to destroy an entire city. His eyes widened. That fox, said Hashirama in horror, realizing the true identity of the beast. He had heard so many stories about it in his childhood, but in those stories it had been a monumental beast capable of breaking mountains, destroying cities in an instant, and so much more. All this time that fox had been hiding itself as a forest animal. Now he could understand why the Uchihas were so confident in their rebellion. With a beast like that on their side, they could cause untold damage on their enemies. And that beast was loyal to Naruto. Hashirama now saw the boy in a different light. Madara was a raging fire, dangerous but easy to spot and control. But Naruto was a silent flame that threatened to burn everything Hashirama held dear. What about the fox, brother? Questioned Itama worriedly. Even Tsunade looked alarmed as she saw all color drain from her brother's face. She looked at the Kinslayer and staring into his eyes, she knew he had made his point. Nothing had truly terrified her eldest brother, not even facing Madara. But right now he looked as if he was about to piss himself, which made Tsunade gulp. Don't be afraid, said Naruto. Those words were meant to be reassuring if not for the cold smirk on Naruto's lips and the dangerous look in his eyes that actually showed her what the beast was capable of if Naruto allowed him to run amok. Tsunade now understood why many feared this man. Naruto was a complicated man, even an interesting one, but it also made him a dangerous man. Something which he just proved to Tsunade's family. What is your true goal, Naruto Uchiha? Asked Hashirama dreadfully, making the boy give a cunning smile in return. I am not interested in these petty feuds. What I truly want, said Naruto seriously as he got up from his chair and walked towards the wall where the map of the ninja world was placed. Hashirama and his siblings followed the Uchiha and soon stepped beside. What do you want? They asked in unison, staring at the map with curiosity and fear in their hearts. Naruto's cold smile was enough to stop their hearts momentarily. What I want for our people is not just the land of fire, but... He placed his hand on the entire map and crumbled it in his hand. His eyes were full of determination and ambition. The kingdom of ninjas. Hashirama was stunned. It was true, both the ancestors of Uchiha and Senju had ruled the entire world before their war broke out. They were the strongest clans in the world and could muster up a great army if they joined together. Nobody could stop them if they united. He could only stare at Naruto with stunned silence, unable to believe what this boy was truly capable of. He was ambitious, but not for himself. He cared about people, including civilians, and had the cunning to even make Hashirama respect and fear him. His next words only strengthened Hashirama's respect and fear of the boy. So either we can continue our bitter feud, or take back what is rightfully ours, said Naruto seriously. What about revenge against my family? Asked Hashirama daringly, looking Naruto right in the eye for even the slightest sign of deceit. The boy sighed as he clenched his fists. I don't want to kill all of your people, Hashirama. I hate Tobirama for killing my brother and would have killed him no matter what happened if I hadn't made a promise to someone that I would spare his life. So no, if you stop fighting against my family then I will not cause any harm to yours, promised Naruto bitterly. Tsunade was stunned. An Uchiha who was actually willing to set aside his revenge. Not only was it impossible but something which only Naruto's grandfather had tried to do before, and that man got a very bad punishment in return for his sincerity in seeking peace. Yet here was Naruto willing to take another chance. Had she been wrong in judging this man? Was her prejudice due to his past actions stopping her from seeing him for who he truly was? She had heard all about other people's story on why Naruto killed his people, but she had never heard his side, and for the first time it made her feel guilty. Before she could ponder more on this matter, Hashirama broke the silence. You are asking me to place a lot of trust in you and your people, Naruto, said Hashirama cautiously, earning a nod from the Uchiha. A risk which my family shall equally share, Lord Hashirama, replied Naruto, earning a grim nod from Hashirama. He looked at Itama and Tsunade only to see they were conflicted. Hashirama was no better, so he looked at the Senju clan head one last time. Think about my offer. Either we'll meet in my chambers to discuss terms or on the battlefield. I hope you make a wise choice, Lord Hashirama. Now, have a good day, said Naruto respectfully. He was about to walk away when he heard Hashirama call out his name. Turning back, he saw all three Senjus staring at him seriously. Our people may take time in trusting each other. But if I am to go forward with this, then I have to at least trust the person who brought me this offer in the first place, explained Hashirama, earning a nod from Naruto. What can make you trust me? Asked Naruto sincerely. I want to know who Naruto Uchiha truly is. His brow furrowed as he saw Hashirama staring at him intensely. The Senju clan head was quite serious. How can I make that happen? Questioned Naruto. His breath nearly stopped when he recognized the look in Hashirama's eyes. Why did you do it? Chapter 18. Kinslayer. Naruto stood still, unable to accept what was just asked of him. In front of his eyes, he saw flashes pass by one after another. He could hear every scream tear through his heart, all that blood staining his skin even now. His hands slightly trembled as the memory of what he did that night came back to haunt him. He had sworn never to say the truth to anyone, sworn that he would take that secret to his grave bearing the curse. And yet in the eyes of all three Senjus, he saw only one thing. They wanted the truth. It was his darkest secret, one even more important than the existence of his unborn children with Shizuka. If he revealed it to anyone, it could very likely tear his clan apart. But if he didn't, then it was almost certain that his people would die fighting against both the daimyo and Senjus. Kinslayer. He could still hear that voice calling him that, and he cursed himself for getting into this situation, for there was no going back now. He had laid out all the cards and his opponent had called him on it. Now it was time to pay. He could refuse, but it would undermine his credibility and destroy any chance of the Senjus laying faith in him. He inwardly laughed on even thinking that such a moment would come where he would be desperate to get the Senjus to trust him, when all his life he had wanted nothing more than to make them pay for killing his brothers. Life was certainly a roller coaster ride, at least in his case. I need a drink, he whispered hesitantly. It was barely morning and he wanted to dull his senses, but he could figure out no other way where he could tell the Senjus what they wanted to hear. There was no way in hell a sober version of him was going to tell them even a quarter of the truth. Thankfully, Hashirama didn't question or even rebuke his demand and simply ordered one of his people to get the finest wine or sake available at the earliest. Naruto was more than relieved for the fact that he had skipped breakfast today. It would only allow him to get drunk faster. It was a risk because it would dull his senses, and if the Senjus decided to kill him, then they could bloody well do it. But they wouldn't, because if he died here, then it wouldn't matter who killed him or why. Madara would burn this entire city with everyone in it and murder Tobirama in the cruelest ways known to man. His brother's anger sometimes even terrified him, and after what he was about to do, it would not just be Madara but his father and aunt who would all be pissed at him greatly. Still, there was no going back now, so he took a seat on the couch as the Senju family took up seats on the one on his opposite. The guard luckily brought 2 fine bottles of both wine and sake. He knew drinking both of them together was a bad idea, but frankly, he didn't care right now. While he had his drinks and felt his senses dull more and more, his audience maintained a respectful silence and made every effort not to stare at him too openly. Although he did see Tsunade getting a little disappointed on seeing him finish his 2 bottles and the effects kicking in so soon. He stored that information for later. Maybe someday he could engage the Senju princess in a drinking contest. If they became allies, then that had a great possibility of happening. Even with his dulled senses, he aimlessly stared across the room, seeing faces he never thought he would see again. The bright red walls only seemed to remind him of all the crimson blood that had been shed that night. Finally, he mustered all the courage he had and hesitantly looked at the 3 Senjus who, if his drunken mind was seeing right, were quite eager to listen. It all started after our victory at the Great Tama River. Flashback. 10 years ago. Naruto sat in the middle of the Naka temple surrounded by his clansmen on all sides. All of his family was here except for Madara, who was currently away on another mission. The Uchihas looked to be in a good mood, for they had just scored their single largest victory against the Senju in years. And they had the Sharingan back. He saw his father stand up, making their remaining clansmen cease their chatter. Every set of eyes were now fixed on Tajima Uchiha. "We have achieved a great victory," announced Tajima proudly, earning a loud roar of cheers. When it finally died down, Tajima looked at his people with even more confidence, and they could feel his enthusiasm as they looked back at him with hope. "I have called you all here because it is our custom to thank the gods for giving us the strength to achieve what we did. It is true that we paid a heavy price for that. Nobody blamed Tajima when he took a pause for while many had lost friends and family. Tajima had lost the most with the death of his 3 sons. But at the same time, he had gained immense prestige and had his position secure as clan head for the rest of his life now that his last 2 sons had the Sharingan. In fact, Tajima's family reign was guaranteed for generations. But we won. So today, I seek blessings from the gods and ask you to join me, declared Tajima. There was not a single protest from everyone as all the Uchihas rose as one before joining their leader and his family in kneeling before the statues of Amaterasu, Shinigami, Tsukiyomi, Hachiman, Izanami, Izanagi and the dragon. Naruto found himself intensely staring at the ancient deities. People said they were not worshipped anymore because they were old and never existed in the first place. But one look at his people showed him they didn't believe it for 1 second. No matter who they were, there was not one Uchiha who didn't look a devoted person. He remembered tales of Amaterasu, goddess of the sun. The scary tales of Shinigami, the Death Reaper. Not one Uchiha could claim not to fear this god. The songs of Tsukiyomi and his loyalty. The brother of Amaterasu and the god of the moon, not to mention the Uchiha's prime god. The courage of Hachiman, the god of war. The twins Izanagi and Izanami, god of the sky and goddess of the earth. The dragon, his clan's proclaimed ancestor. He didn't know if they truly existed or not, but by now most of the world believed the Uchihas to be retainers of dragon blood. Standing before these 7 gods made him feel at peace and gave him strength as he tried to suppress the feeling of missing his brothers. They would never join him in this pious task, never get to share this peace with him. He was brought out of his musings when the prayer was finally completed and the people started getting back on their feet. Soon chatter broke out amongst the clan members and even Tajima was surrounded by people eager to talk to him. Even Aunt Naori was swarmed by a group of women and looked to be busy. He bit his lip and waited for any of them to look at him and was not proven wrong when Tajima beckoned him to step forward. Naruto obediently walked towards his father and saw an old man with a stern face and ice-cold eyes waiting for him. His once dark hair had turned all white and his wrinkled skin made him look more like a glorified mummy. "Meet your great uncle, Yamamoto Uchiha." Naruto's friendly expression vanished as that name struck home. If he remembered it correctly, then this man was one of the distant cousins of his late grandfather. When he died, this man tried to take the Uchiha leadership from Tajima but couldn't gather enough support. In retaliation, Tajima had sent his uncle away on various missions that had kept him away from home for decades. But the resurgence of the Sharingan was a big enough event for an exile to come back. And he certainly didn't like the way this man was looking at him. He knew that look, had often seen it enough in Anabi and Yashira's eyes whenever Izuna had doted on him. Jealousy. Still, protocol demanded him to show this elder respect despite his past actions. So he swallowed his pride and suspicion before giving a respectful bow to the older man. "You taught him well, Tajima," said Yamamoto crisply. Those words were meant as a praise, yet the condescending tone left little doubt regarding the man's true feelings regarding Naruto and his family. Fortunately, Tajima was used to something like this and simply looked at his relative calmly. "This was a courtesy, uncle. Since you hold an honorary seat on the Elders' Council, it was my responsibility to inform you of our latest victory. I have done my job and I hope your stay here will be comfortable," replied Tajima. Even Naruto could see the older man grinding his teeth in order to contain his fury because Tajima again reminded him that he was not welcome to stay any more than necessary. What made it worse was the fact that there was nothing Yamamoto could do to change that. Realizing he couldn't hurt the Uchiha leader, the old man then turned his gaze towards Naruto and this time he didn't try to hide his true feelings. "Show me those eyes of yours," commanded Yamamoto, and even he couldn't hide his eagerness. "No," Tajima smirked on seeing the gobsmacked look on his uncle's face on hearing that answer. He had clearly not expected that and he couldn't be more proud of his youngest son than he was right now. Looking at the boy, Tajima saw an icy gaze staring at Yamamoto, refusing to bow to the man's blatant demands. "Are you disrespecting an elder and a member of your family, boy?" reprimanded Yamamoto harshly. If looks could kill, then Naruto should have been on fire. Tajima narrowed his eyes dangerously. It was true that things were not exactly peachy between him and Naruto, but to watch his boy be talked to like that invoked a renowned fury in him. Certainly not from this man. Before Tajima could come to his son's rescue, the boy took up the job himself. My father taught me it is treason to command your liege lord's family. You expect respect but give none in return. I hope you understand that you have no right to ask anything of me. Even if you had, I wouldn't give you a penny. Tajima was more than impressed by what his son just said. If they were not surrounded by their clan, he might have even praised the boy for not acting like a child but far more maturely. Yamamoto looked thunderous and Tajima didn't miss nearly a dozen Uchiha inching close to the three of them. He narrowed his eyes at those people, remembering each of them perfectly. They were all his uncle's supporters who had tried to overthrow him. Many had recommended them to be put to death for their treason, but Tajima had not done that, knowing how much it would have hurt his dead father's soul. Besides, their clan had taken a mighty blow from the Senju and he could not afford to lose trained fighters at any cost. So instead, he gave them missions that kept most of them away from home for a very long time. But now that vacation was about to end. Naruto tensed as he too noticed the unknown people closing towards them. He was still deciding his next move when Tajima stepped before him protectively and glared murderously at his uncle and his supporters. We are done here. Pack up your shit and leave before first light tomorrow, commanded Tajima icily, and if I don't, challenged the old man. Naruto could practically see the supporters of each faction eyeing each other warily. One wrong move and things could go haywire. Kento Senju. Nearly every Uchiha in the vicinity flinched on hearing that hated man's name. But their reaction was not one of disgust but of utter terror. It was a well-known fact that Kento had been the instigator who slaughtered Tajima's siblings when his father tried to offer peace. What Tajima did in return was enough to even terrify his own men. It took years, but Tajima was relentless. He finally managed to capture Kento and his entire family except for his son Butsuma. What happened next was enough to even make Yamamoto flinch as he remembered that incident. Tajima didn't kill his prisoners or torture them even. He broke them. Months of imprisonment in the dark cells with only the barest amount of food and water had left most of the Senju family insane or terrified. Their mental capacity was so eroded that they saw shadows everywhere waiting to kill them. Tajima gave Kento and his sons who were still sane one offer. Either have Kento's wife and daughters be raped by hundreds of Uchiha, or do the deed themselves. The prisoners had begged and screamed, but Tajima was merciless. He knew they would do what he wanted them to do and watched in grim satisfaction as the Senju head and his sons were forced to do one of the most disgusting acts on earth. And he made them do it again and again, just as they had raped his little sister. The family was broken beyond repair, and then Tajima simply allowed those women to be raped again and again by Uchiha until they died. Kento's sons tried to fight and Tajima slaughtered them brutally before their father's eyes, further traumatizing the man. By then, nothing was left of the Senju head. His spirit was broken. And then Tajima let him leave. Kento turned up at his hometown a few weeks later, a completely broken man, and before his entire clan, he set himself on fire. His screams as he was burned alive were enough to traumatize Butsuma for a lifetime as he vainly tried to save his father, but in the end failed. The Senjus got the message clearly. Fire and blood. From that day forth, Tajima Uchiha was considered a brutal man. Naruto saw for the first time the respect and fear in the eyes of even those who hated his father. Tajima dared them to defy him, but no one did. Not even Yamamoto. Get the hell out of my sight, commanded Tajima coldly. Just after dinner, Naruto had sneaked out of his home in order to visit the lazy fox. The beast always pretended to be annoyed or even furious by Naruto's increasing visits, but the beast's eyes that always sparkled with curiosity betrayed his true feelings. As for Naruto, he found Kurama interesting and fun to be around. Since Madara was always away on missions, it allowed him to spend time with someone with whom he was more comfortable than either his father or aunt or any other Uchiha. It was a sad truth, and he could only hope his relationship with them improved in the future. He was about to take his secret route to sneak into the forests when he felt it. A faint presence in the southwest direction, and there was only one place of importance there. Curious, he activated his Sharingan only to have his faint smile falter and be replaced by a heavy frown. Goddamn if it wasn't those orphans trying to break the rules again. He never really cared as to what they did since most of the time it was completely harmless, but today his father was clearly pissed off and might just deal with them harshly if they were caught. So, he changed course and instead followed the source of chakra signatures. Within minutes, he arrived at his destination and frowned on sensing those presences moving further underground. Those fools! Didn't they know they were not allowed to be in this place after sunset? With a resigned sigh, he entered through the doors and looked around in the darkness. It was dark, but thanks to his Sharingan he easily saw the trail of chakra and followed after it descending towards the basement. He heard voices. So many voices. We move tonight. His breath stopped as he realized the owner of that voice. The same man who had nearly threatened his father to a fight in the morning. Yamamoto Uchiha. Still, he calmed his nerves and decided to listen on the conversation. If they were going to harm his family, then he needed to know everything before going to Tajima. There's no going back after this, Yamamoto-sama. Are you sure this is really necessary? Asked a hesitant young voice. It is the only way, Keiji. You can verify it yourself. Assured Yamamoto calmly. I have waited years for this. Finally, we can put Tajima in the ground for what he did to us, whispered another. Once we rebel there is no going back. Either we'll live or Tajima and his family. Steal your hearts because we will wipe all of them out and take this clan back to its rightful place, declared Yamamoto. Can we really take Tajima head on along with his supporters? Asked a skeptical voice. Yes. We can, reassured Yamamoto with so much confidence and the slightest hint of certainty. Naruto had gone deathly pale by the time he finished hearing the conversation. His hands were trembling. These people were going to attack his family. Tajima needed to know about this revolt immediately. Even if Yamamoto had fewer supporters, it still didn't diminish the danger to Tajima's life and that of his family. He was just about to leave when he heard a terrified scream followed by dozens more. Women and children. Had they already started taking hostages from Tajima's supporters? If that was the case, then the situation was even more alarming than he had previously imagined. He could feel there were at least 50 to 60 people in the basement. How many of them were enemies that he couldn't know? Tajima needed to know right now. Orders? Asked a cold voice, devoid of any emotion. Naruto stopped mid-flight, clearly trapped between running and staying. His heart threatened to burst out of his chest. He had already started sweating and his hands just couldn't stop trembling. His people, his clan were all in danger. Kill them all. His sword was unleashed as those words passed his ears. There was no time to react, no time to get help. He had to save these people from those madmen. He ran down the stairs at an alarming speed with his sword ready and eyes wide in terror. He didn't think what would happen. He couldn't imagine doing anything else. Channeling chakra through his sword, he brutally carved the wooden door of the basement in half and crashed inside. Rolling in quick succession, he got back on his feet with his Sharingan blazing. He saw nearly 20 to 25 fully armed Uchihas standing around helpless and terrified women as well as little children tied to wooden posts. Their eyes full of horror, fear and unending tears, while the armed men looked shocked at the intrusion. What the hell are you doing? Yelled Naruto furiously, glaring straight at his great uncle. The man sneered at him, his eyes full of so much loathing. If it isn't the young dragon, mocked Yamamoto, even going so far as howling a poor scream of a dragon. The old man's supporters now turned towards him with the same look of utter loathing in their eyes as they raised their weapons. I command you to release these people at once. Disobey and you shall be executed for treason, warned Naruto, his Sharingan glaring murderously at these people. And they laughed at him. He gritted his teeth as he saw the women and children whimper on seeing their captors were not going to obey that command even if it had come from their liege lord's son. They were really going to rebel. That was something. Maybe you do have some dragon blood in you, mocked Yamamoto. These people are our family. You have no right to do any harm to them, warned Naruto again, earning a snort from the rebel Uchihas. We don't want to, but for the greater good of our clan, we have to. Said Yamamoto reluctantly, and was not surprised when the angry young boy frowned at his words. What? So naive. You think you and your brother got the Sharingan because you're special? Asked one rebel Uchiha in disgust. It's just a simple process. One which your father kept hidden from everyone for years. Roared another rebel. What the hell are you talking about? Hissed Naruto bitterly. Yamamoto sighed in frustration but stepped aside a little to reveal their family's ancient tablet. There were many secrets engraved in that stone and only a handful Uchiha in history could read it. And even they couldn't read it much without the Sharingan. Our clan suffered for centuries without the Sharingan. But your father and his ancestors before him kept this secret from us. You activated those eyes because of the pain you felt when your brothers died. It must not have been a good experience, but it gave you the power to serve your clan better. We are doing the same, proclaimed Yamamoto, by murdering innocent women and children? These are our people. We are sworn to defend them, yelled Naruto in disbelief and mad fury. If 2 Sharingans could give us such a big victory over the Senjus, imagine what hundreds more would do, asked Yamamoto eagerly, all sense of rationality gone from the man's eyes. Naruto stood still aghast seeing what was happening before his very eyes. This was a dream, it had to be. Madness runs in your clan. His breath stopped when he remembered Kurama's warning about his clan and what they were capable of. He had refuted the fox back then, telling him that the Uchiha were only cruel to their enemies. But now, after hearing these rebels and seeing those innocents about to be butchered, his belief shattered. We will take back what is rightfully ours in fire and blood. These women and children are our nieces and nephews. We love them, but their sacrifice will be remembered in the future. Today, we all shall rise as dragons, declared Yamamoto enthusiastically, making every one of his supporters cheer for victory. We will strike down Tajima. We will butcher the Senjus. And we will rule the world. The mad cheering was stopped when a murderous aura spread across the entire basement. The killing intent that was unleashed made the captive children cry as the woman tried to console them despite being tied to different posts. The rebels flinched when they saw a pair of Sharingan eyes glaring at them murderously. Yamamoto clenched his jaw on seeing the defiant boy and unleashed his sword, making his followers do the same. Half of you, start the ritual. The rest shall help me in putting this runt down, declared Yamamoto. Hi, chorused the rebels in silent glee, the eagerness to activate their Sharingan clearly visible on their maniacal faces. Now you die, boy, warned Yamamoto, pointing his sword right at Naruto. Naruto's hands inched towards his pouch on the back. After his and Kurama's encounter with the Kagaya and Hagoromo clans, he had made it a habit of being fully armed when he visited the fox. That habit might just save his life today. He glanced at every one of his enemies and realized one bitter fact. There were too many of them. Still, he had no choice but to fight, even if it meant his death. He could never look Izuna in the eye if he ran here, leaving these women and children to die. He raised his own sword and looked his great uncle right in the eye. Then let us die. Before anyone could react, Naruto unleashed 2 large smoke bombs from his pouch and shrouded the entire basement in a cloud of purple smoke. He heard the rebels and the prisoners coughing violently. Many shouted to each other asking for Naruto's whereabouts because they could not see the boy. But Naruto could see them with his Sharingan. He glanced at his sword, knowing despite all the reasons, he would be killing his own people to save his own people. There was no victory here, only duty. The 5 sharp kunai flew from his left hand, hitting their targets with perfect accuracy. A part of him died as he saw the wounded men clutch their pierced throats as they spat blood. Their horror was clear for Naruto to see as they all slumped to their knees before falling lifelessly to the wooden floor. Tears stung his eyes, and oddly he felt the world move even more slowly as he charged. He gave a wordless battle cry before plunging his sword clean through the nearest man's heart. Before the man could even fall to his death, Naruto had moved to his next target and then the next one. He oddly heard the women and children scream painfully in the chaos before falling silent one after another. Naruto rushed in their direction but was blocked by 4 strong men who saw him clearly now that the smoke had started to disappear. Already he had killed 10 of the rebels, much to Yamamoto's horror. The old man watched 4 of his best fighters charge towards his great-nephew and gulped when he saw the boy's Sharingan evolve into 3 tomos. A full Sharingan. Naruto saw each and every movement of his enemies before they could even act halfway with his sword, making quick work of them. They were all stronger, older and more experienced than him. But he was faster and smaller, and he could see what they wanted to do before they even did it. He watched Yamamoto take a few steps back in fear as the last of his supporters tried to stop the red-eyed boy. Burn him. Burn everything. Burn them all. Yamamoto had lost every last ounce of his sanity, his crazy eyes watching the boy carve the rebels left and right. On hearing his frantic command, the last 4 of his supporters quickly performed a set of hand seals. Naruto barely had enough time to gasp as 4 giant fireballs were unleashed at him. In such close proximity, he had no space to evade and no water to call for his defense. He gave a silent scream as the fireballs hit him. Distantly he also heard the women and children behind him scream as they were hit by one of the fireballs that went astray. The entire basement was caught on fire. Despair coursed through Naruto's heart as he watched the flames engulf him and the women and children. They screamed, he didn't. He waited for that inevitable pain to consume him just as it was consuming those innocents, but strangely he felt the pain equivalent of a small knife tearing up his skin. He was on fire and yet he was not burning. His pale skin was turning beet red, and in some places even black from the fire, but even so he was not getting charred. A fact which shocked his remaining enemies. Pure rage coursed through Naruto's heart as he looked at these monsters. The rage he had only felt when Izuna died in his arms. The four rebels tried to flee away from the burning boy only to realize they were trapped in the fire of their making. They raised their swords in a last effort as Naruto charged towards them with murder in his eyes. Yamamoto winced when he saw his great-nephew butcher his last men. The boy took away their limbs, their bare hearts, their genitals, before taking away their heads. Covered in blood, gore, and guts and being consumed by fire made Naruto appear as the Shinigami himself born alive. He saw Yamamoto frantically grab one of his dying supporters. "Kill him," yelled the old man, only to see the wounded man die. When he finally turned away from his now deceased last supporter, he saw Naruto standing in front of him. All around them was fire, blood, and death. They were the last ones standing. "What are you?" asked Yamamoto in horror, as his eyes saw the fire still clinging to the boy covered in blood, gore, and guts. A true Uchiha. With those last words, he charged forward and took a high jump. Yamamoto weakly raised his own sword to defend, but Naruto poured in every ounce of his strength into that strike and watched as his sword destroyed his great-uncle's weapon before cleaving the man in half from head to toe. Showers of blood and flesh rained down on him as the man fell and was soon consumed in the flames he started. The entire Uchiha temple was on fire now and its foundations were falling apart. Despite the collapsing structure he was in, Naruto moved forward with mad fury burning in his Sharingan eyes. He could not think, he could not feel anything but hatred. Those men were monsters, but the thing which started this madness was right in front of his eyes. He raised his sword and brought it down brutally against the Uchiha tablet. The stone cracked but did not shatter. Naruto raised his weapon again and attacked. He screamed himself hoarse as his sword attacked the tablet again and again. Finally, after 24 strikes, the ancient relic shattered in half as Naruto grabbed the pieces and flung them viciously into the raging fire. His rage finally died and silent tears fell from his eyes on seeing despite his best efforts the rebels had managed to kill the women and children. He had failed again, just like he had failed in saving his brothers. Broken and defeated, he marched towards the center of the burning basement grabbing a chair. He sat down and lowered his head as his hands clutched his blood-stained sword. The fire burned all around him and the ceiling started to collapse, destroying the ancient Uchiha temple. But he couldn't see or listen to anything. The only thing he could remember were those words that would haunt him forever. "Kill them all." Flashback end. "That's where my father and my clan found me." The Senju family sat in stunned silence as Naruto finished his tale. Their faces pale and eyes wide as they heard what the Uchihas tried to do to each other in their mad thirst for power. Hashirama had watched Naruto every second as he revealed the truth to them, and never once had he detected any treachery or lies. The Senju head knew the boy had said nothing but the truth, for the tears in his eyes were real. The pain, the sadness, and most of all the guilt of his failure still haunted Naruto till this day. Tsunade and Itama still could not believe Naruto went in despite the danger. He fought against enemies that outnumbered and outclassed him, knowing he would die all for the sake of innocents that were caught in the madness of the Uchiha. It went against everything they had heard about this man. "If this is true, why didn't you tell anyone? Why did your father hide the truth?" asked Itama hesitantly, and saw the hollow gaze of the Uchiha stare back at him. "The family is all that matters. The clan is all that lives on," recited Naruto, the words of his father. "It would have torn your clan apart if the truth was revealed. Your people would stop trusting each other and your allies would desert you," whispered Tsunade, as she realized the aftermath of this tragedy the Uchihas could have faced. She flinched when Naruto's Sharingan eyes looked at her, and in them, she saw nothing but pain and guilt. Would you have done it? Would you have stepped aside and let those innocents burn to death? Would you have kept your oath of loyalty and let those madmen do what they wanted to do? Asked Naruto bitterly. For the first time in her life, Tsunade had no answer to give, and she could only lower her gaze in shame. She or Itama could not look into this man's eyes, whom everyone had called a Kinslayer, when all he had tried to do was protect his family. Why? Naruto turned to look at Hashirama, who was staring at him with sadness present in his dark eyes. A ninja protects from the shadows, never seeks glory, only his duty. Hashirama closed his eyes as a lone tear slipped past his cheeks. It was never easy with Uchihas. One could never love them truly or hate them truly. There were madmen in that clan like Yamamoto and his supporters who would go to any lengths for the sake of power, even killing their families. Such people could never be trusted no matter what. But at the same time, there were loyal and good men like Naruto. Ninjas who did their duty to the best of their abilities without expecting anything in return. Looking at Naruto, Hashirama finally realized the extent of his sacrifice. He accepted disgrace in the place of honor, hatred in the place of love, bearing it all with his unwavering silence, and all for the sake of the Uchiha name. He sacrificed his entire life so that the Uchihas could live theirs. Now that same boy was risking everything to save his people again, and there was the only reason for that which was clear for Hashirama to see in the boy's eyes. Love. Naruto got up from his seat and wordlessly walked towards the exit until a firm hand was placed on his shoulder. He stopped. Turning around, he saw Hashirama staring at him with great pride in his eyes. Enough. Tsunade and Itama both joined their eldest brother. They didn't say anything, but their faint nods were all that Hashirama and Naruto needed to see. I will believe in you, Uchiha Naruto. Hashirama extended his hand forward as he finished those words, watching the stunned boy glance at his face, then at his offered hand. Thousands of years of war, millions of deaths, an unending story of suffering, pain, and hatred. And it was about to end. Naruto looked at Hashirama, seriously trying to find any treachery in the Senju, but could not find any. He then glanced at Itama, who gave a small smile of confirmation. Tsunade gathered her courage and looked at Naruto when he stared at her. In her eyes, he saw guilt, hesitation, and fear. But there was also hope. A small smile formed on his lips. I have seen your guts. Hashirama smiled widely as Naruto raised his own hand and joined it with Hashirama's, bringing an end to a war that had lasted thousands of years. Chapter 19. Rebellion. Naruto sat alone in one of the castle towers of the royal palace. Here, away from the hustle and bustle, he sat on the stairs. His hands gently caressed dawn, and one could see fine liquid drops hanging on the fine sword, with more joining every few seconds. He should not be feeling like this, certainly not after he managed an actual peace treaty with the Senjus. But with that came the condition of marrying someone he didn't love. Most of all, it implied setting aside someone whom he had genuine feelings for. Hashirama had reluctantly agreed to not make Naori Uchiha marry him in exchange because Naruto warned him that Tajima would rather choose war than making his only living sister a hostage. Hashirama, in his naivety or pure heart, agreed to trust Naruto with his sister's life. But on the other hand, the Senju Lord did ask to share power equally between the Uchiha and Senju. A task which Naruto knew would be the end of him, because his family would rather eat their own guts than relinquish even a penny to their hated enemies. Naruto had also promised to keep Tsunade safe, treat her as his lawful wife, give her all the respect and comfort deserving of his life partner. It was the only way for him to keep the Uchihas and Senjus from destroying themselves. So many promises made to so many people made him wonder as to whether future historians would call him Kinslayer, as most called him today, or the dragon who promised. Another pain crushed his heart as he remembered his conversation with Makoto an hour ago. Flashback. An hour ago, Makoto had been waiting for him when he entered their shared chambers. He had been dreading this conversation, but one look at her face showed him that she already knew. Itachi told me, she clarified, on seeing his worried gaze. What did he tell you? Asked Naruto hesitantly, making a wistful smile cross her lips. That there is nothing more powerful in this world than a just and loyal man. I am looking at one right now. He clenched his fists tightly and suppressed the lump in his throat. Tears threatened to burst from his eyes as she gave him a knowing nod. Why was duty always the hardest to perform? Was the price for loyalty always the highest? Many said love was always the death of loyalty. But in his case, both love and loyalty would someday be the end of him. I did what I thought was right, he said weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. I know, she replied gently, we attack the capital before dawn tomorrow. Hashirama will focus on capturing the daimyo and his family. Our job will be to neutralize the city defenders as quickly as possible. The Senjus will provide most of their forces to aid us, but Itama and Tsunade Senju shall command them. Our troops shall be commanded by me, however overall command of our combined forces lies in my hands, explained Naruto seriously, trying to keep his mind away from the painful topic of his marriage to the Senju princess. And, prompted Makoto, and didn't miss him wince. I will marry Tsunade Senju once we have the capital. The war is over. A lone tear slipped from her eye as she marched towards the window and quickly inhaled some fresh air to overcome her own panic. He tried to get to her but stopped halfway through with a constricted look visible in his eyes. I'm sorry, Makoto. She didn't detect any lies or fake sympathy in his words. He sounded genuinely sorry, which made it only worse for her because it was he who would suffer more than her. He might not love her yet, but she had loved him for years. Watching him go through something like this was breaking her heart. How do you do it? She asked sadly. How do you set aside your entire life for someone else? How do you remain strong in the face of so much heartbreak? He was silent for several long moments as her questions echoed in his heart. They were the ones he had asked himself for many years, and he had come up with only one answer. A distant face of a smiling boy carrying another younger boy on his shoulders flashed through his mind. If he could focus some more, he could hear that distant voice again in his heart. I learned from the best. He taught me to be strong in the face of danger, to have the heart to stand up for justice, to remain loyal in the face of obstacles, and most of all to live your entire life for your family without expecting anything in return. Izuna lived and died by that honor. I guess I am the same. In my heart, maybe I am still that little boy clinging to his brother's back. That perhaps I am the man he could have been. She had always known he had loved his brother deeply, more than anyone else. But today, she perhaps saw the true him for the first time. She didn't see his face but that of Izuna Uchiha looking back at her. All of Naruto's choices, his hardships, his pain, his loyalty, his duty, it had all been conducted on the basis of the teachings he learned from Izuna. You're a good man, Naruto, she whispered with a proud smile. They both looked at each other, conveying all they felt with their eyes. Makoto couldn't stop the tears falling from her eyes now, but he remained strong. You deserve someone better than me. Someone who'll put you first before his duty and loyalty, said Naruto bitterly. Good luck on your journey, Naruto Uchiha, she whispered. He stopped any of his pending explanations or apologies on hearing those words. They hit him like a silent wave sweeping his world away as he felt the connection shared between them break, for she had released him. You too, Makoto. Those words were barely out of his lips before he turned away in order to disappear. The tears were now clawing at his eyelids and his chest felt crushed. Naruto. He swiftly turned around and marched back straight towards her. Their lips crashed against each other as their silent tears now clashed openly against their cheeks. They both devoured each other, trying to capture the last essence of each other and yet at the same time preparing to say goodbye. He was the one who broke the kiss gently, followed by kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her nose, her chin, as if he was memorizing every part of her in his brain while she did the same for him with her eyes. When they glanced at each other one last time, he saw the life he could have had with her. A small house with two little boys playing with each other while they both watched them with smiles on their faces. Of Madara sneaking in through the window with gifts in his arms, making the boys squeal in delight, and Makoto giving her brother-in-law an admonishing glare for his antics. Of Tajima and Naori sitting beside their entire family, regaling their grandchildren, grandnephews with their past exploits. He walked away before his resolve could crumble in the face of that wishful dream. Flashback end. He got up from the stairs and wiped away his tears. It was easy to do one's duty when it cost one nothing, but most difficult when it cost them everything. Loyalty was easy to give but most hard to follow through. Words had power, but it was always actions that were remembered. Shizuka had foreseen him making 3 difficult choices in his life, ones which would determine not just his future but that of the world. He had not believed her then, but now it was his choice that had made possible a true peace between the Uchiha and Senju. His choice that was now about to join two blood families and fulfill the Sage of Six Paths' dream. If this was the first choice, then he dreaded what the other two would ask of him. He had already sacrificed his lover, risked the anger of his family and bannermen, and placed his faith in a family that he had hated for most of his life. Whatever the case, a choice was made, and he had to live with it for the rest of his life. Kurama had said that he reminded the Fox of Indra. Would the Uchiha founder make the same choices as he had made? Naruto had a feeling the man wouldn't, maybe even Izuna wouldn't. Maybe it was what set him apart from those two Uchiha. He admired them and was like them in many aspects, but he doubted those men would make the choices he had made. With those thoughts in mind, he walked outside the tower in order to carry out his choice. Tsunade had been waiting for her betrothed to emerge from his self-imposed isolation in the tower. It was not to say, she had not tried to get in but had been stopped by none other than Shisui Uchiha. She had been surprised by his presence and even tried to irritate him for stopping her, but the man had more patience than Tsunade had barbs, and as a result, she was defeated. It had been more than an hour and never once had she seen Shisui even twitch a muscle. The same went for Itachi, who if possible had not even said a word to her. Kinsguard, they were called. Loyal and good men who had followed Naruto for years. If rumors were to be believed, the first ones to pledge their service to Naruto despite his dark past. Devoted themselves to him when he was not even the prospective leader of the Uchiha in the future and had nothing to offer them except disgrace. If she had not heard Naruto's story, she would have considered these men fools for following such a vile man. But after hearing the truth, she knew they had seen the true worth of her betrothed and made their own choice. It made her feel a little jealous. While she was loved and respected by her people and allies alike, it was mostly because she was once Batsuma Senju's only daughter and later on as the only sister of her brothers. Despite her skills in fighting and healing, people still saw her as a princess and a person who needed protection. They would follow her into battle because she was Hashirama's sister and not because of who she was. Naruto, on the other hand, was her complete opposite. Born into a family that almost hated him, losing his brothers early in his life, followed by losing his respect and status in the clan. Naruto was someone destined to be hated and forgotten, yet he had not given up. With his sense of loyalty and duty, he built himself back up from the ashes of his life. Became the best swordsman in the elemental nations, inspired men like the Kinsguard to follow him, regained the trust and respect of his people through victories, and most of all brought an end to a war that had lasted thousands of years. She would probably never say it out loud, but in a way, she felt small in comparison to someone like that, despite her princess status. The rumors don't do your beauty justice, princess, said Shisui with a gentle smile. Tsunade suspiciously looked at the Uchiha. People who often said those words were mostly hungry and lustful dogs, but she couldn't find a hint of lust in those dark black eyes. Itachi on the other hand actually looked even more disinterested in her appearance. She looked at these men in a different light, remembering what they were famous for. The morning star they called Shisui, wielder of the ancestral sword fury that was currently hanging on his hip. He was Naruto's best friend, and if she was to develop any cordial relations with her betrothed, much less any Uchiha, she had to make this man her ally. That was not to discredit the silent shadow who was observing her every move. Itachi Uchiha unnerved her in a way Tsunade couldn't describe. The man was watching her like a hawk, but strangely his eyes didn't display any emotion. Nor hate, fear or even lust. Those kind of men were the most dangerous, and if she ever tried to even lay a finger on Naruto, this man's sword would be the last thing she would ever see. There were other Kinsguard members she had seen but yet to meet. It was actually the matter of one of them which had brought Tsunade here to have a conversation with Naruto in the first place. Well, they won't matter if my future husband continues to hate me, said Tsunade hesitantly, making Shisui grimace. Surprisingly, it was Itachi who spoke. He doesn't hate you, Senju. He hates your judgmental attitude, said Itachi flatly. What? Hissed Tsunade, a vein popping across her forehead. Shisui sighed before sending his friend and fellow Kinsguard a reprimanding glare that made the younger boy shut up. When he looked back at the princess, she looked about ready to explode. So this was the infamous temper of hers. What he means to say is there are many things you don't know about Naruto or our clan and allies alike. Our factions have been at war for a very long time, so it is natural for each side to have their grudges. But Naruto is willing to look past them so that all of us can live. But it is a two-way street, explained Shisui patiently. What do you two think of this peace treaty? I want your opinion, said Tsunade insistently. Her brother was placing a lot of trust in one Uchiha, even going so far as to rebel against the daimyo who was their staunch ally. Naruto did look trustable, but it wouldn't matter if other Uchiha had different ideas of peace. It is not our place. We trust Naruto, that should be enough, replied Itachi calmly, which only seemed to aggravate Tsunade further on hearing the Uchiha's disinterested tone. Not all Uchihas want to continue this never-ending war. Some of us would prefer peace if it can be achieved, it's just we are extremely loyal to our families. If they chose war, then we cannot let them fight alone and die. It is true that Uchihas have plenty of hate in their hearts for their enemies, but it is also true that our clan is one of the most loyal in this world. Stubborn, prideful, but loyal, explained Shisui patiently. And you think Naruto can achieve this peace? Convince Madara and the others to back down? Asked Tsunade skeptically. From what she had seen and heard of Madara, that was a bleak possibility. She watched Shisui grimace, which only further fueled her doubts. Madara loves Naruto more than you or anyone else can imagine. I have faith Naruto can bring our side to the negotiation table. What happens after that depends on the actions and words of both sides, revealed Shisui. You're quite honest. For an Uchiha, said Tsunade with a wry smile. I'll take that as a compliment, acquiesced Shisui with a faint smile. He's here, announced Itachi. When Naruto stepped out of the tower, he was surprised to see her, and in turn, Tsunade didn't miss the still moist cheeks of his. It was all the confirmation she had needed regarding her doubts about a certain Kinsguard member. On seeing her, he informed his two friends to stay back, much to Itachi's protests. Still, he managed to convince them and came towards her. He offered her his arm, which she stared at suspiciously. Wasn't he being a little eager? It would be better if our people see unity among us before tomorrow, he explained simply. It was then Tsunade noticed the nicely hidden Senju guards lurking in the nearby alleys, watching them like trained hawks. So, her brothers were worried about her despite the new peace. Enough to send highly skilled ninjas to keep watch over her. It made her feel happy and bitter at the same time. To think, Naruto saw right through them was another point Tsunade noted about his observation power. They both walked in silence, with him as rigid as a rock and her watching his every step. They made such an awkward pair that she doubted even her loyal guards could not stop sniggering about. Despite the awkwardness, she actually enjoyed the silence, as it allowed her time to look at him more closely. His skin was fair like the moonlight, which was a trademark among Uchihas. His shoulders were broad and strong, earning an approving nod from her. She felt the tension in the muscles of his arm that was connected with hers, but she also felt the strength. But it was his hair that fascinated her most. She had always seen Uchiha with weird spiky hair that were always black in color. They were in such weird shapes that many Uchiha didn't even bother to tame them. But Naruto had light brown hair that were as soft as silk, a fact which was easily displayed by the wind, easily able to ruffle them in every direction. One strand of hair occasionally settled down over his left eye, and Tsunade had to fight back her urge to remove it. She was frustrated when he never glanced at her the way she was doing at him. Quite a stalker, are you? She flushed on being caught red-handed staring at him. A sarcastic retort was about to pass her lips when she noticed his cocky grin was very weak and his eyes were anything but jovial. It was a poor mask of normalcy and strength, one which she saw through instantly. Well, at least you're not ugly, Tsunade deadpanned, unable to stop herself. He tried to resist but failed as an amused smile came on his face. Tsunade, on the other hand, was stunned. His smile was so different than anything she had ever seen before. When he smiled truly, his eyes sparkled with kindness and empathy. His lips twisted to form an amused smirk, and two faint dimples were born across his cheeks that enhanced his boyish looks. It made her blush and look away or risk him teasing her again. That's got to be the weirdest but endearing compliment I've ever received, he commented amusedly. Well then, better take it, replied Tsunade petulantly, making him shake his head at her antics. They both had walked enough distance to reach a beautiful fountain that had a lion roaring water out of its mouth. He didn't know if it was meant to be intimidating or laughable. These capitalists had a strange taste. From the corner of his eye, he saw Shisui and Itachi maintain a respectable distance from them. The same was the case with the Senju guards. Although both sides looked ready to defend their sworn leaders should the situation arise. Knowing Itachi and Shisui, the Senjus would be dead before they even unleashed their swords. Still, deciding to forget those dark thoughts, he decided to focus back on his future wife. The term reminding him again of what he had sacrificed to accept her in his life. Tsunade was currently busy staring at the strange fountain, which allowed him a chance to sneak a peek. Despite their rough start, he had never once not considered her beautiful. Even more so than the other women he had been with, much to his shame for his ability of seeing the truth. She had a heart-shaped face and a strange diamond-shaped seal on her forehead. He didn't know what purpose it served, but it actually enhanced her beauty. Her skin was more fairer than him, which was saying something because the Senjus usually were dark-skinned except for a few anomalies. Her golden blonde hair were tied into fine ponytail that reached up to her waist. Even the glowing sun couldn't shine more than her hair. Her face always looked gentle and welcoming when she smiled kindly, and menacing when one of her sinister and cold smiles took hold. But it were her eyes that fascinated him most. Those hazel orbs had so much life in them, so much happiness and positive vibes were overflowing from those orbs, which were a stark proof of her not being exposed to the things he had, which was a good thing, for the world could not handle two of him. That thought made him laugh out loud, much to her surprise. "What is it?" she inquired curiously. "Just realized how different we are, and it's a good thing because the world cannot handle two of either one of us," he joked. Much to his surprise, she burst out laughing as well, and in a manner which would have made most Uchiha noblewomen beat red in embarrassment. But he found the laugh quite endearing, for it was free and unhindered by manners, something which most Uchiha were always bound by. When she finally stopped laughing, the tension between them had subsided greatly and went even low when Naruto offered to sit down with her at the edge of the fountain. He proved his manners by making her grab a seat first before taking one for himself, and while they were close, he maintained a respectable distance in order to not make her feel overwhelmed. Such minor things would have escaped him had he not been with other women before, and had Naori not hammered these manners in his thick brain over the past decade. Those thoughts again made him feel more relaxed and at ease. Which was a good thing, for the next words out of Tsunade's mouth were completely not what he had expected to hear. "Is there any other woman in your life?" He looked at her seriously, all playfulness gone from his eyes. Despite their shaky peace, he was yet to trust her enough. A fact which she saw through. "I am not judging you," clarified Tsunade, sending a thankful glance at Shisui, who gave her a small encouraging smile. Naruto looked at her again, more specifically in her eyes. There he found no lies, which eased him a little. He thought about refuting the question but decided against it, considering she would find out sooner or later. It was better if it came from him. "I had?" asked Tsunade, wincing slightly as the implication behind his answer became clear. "I ended it, and it is not for any reason you might think," clarified Naruto earnestly. Tsunade had to steady herself in order to not lash out at him. In her experience, men always abandoned their lovers when they found better ones. And she was no small cash, if that was the reason he had left his former lover. Shisui's advice came running back in her mind, which prevented her from going down that line of thinking. Deciding to take a chance, she listened to him. "While it is true ours is a political marriage and there is no love between us yet. But that does not change the fact that I will not dishonor you as my future wife or her by carrying on an illegitimate relation behind your back. I respect you enough not to do that, and he froze. "I love her enough not to do that." He couldn't believe what he was about to say to Tsunade, more than that what he was about to admit to himself even. All this time, he had refused to believe, and only now when Makoto was gone because of his choices did he realize. Even Tsunade saw through him, even if he never managed to finish that sentence. He closed his eyes waiting for that lashing he deserved to receive from her, but was surprised when she actually entwined her hands with his. "I'm glad you were honest with me." Stunned, he looked at her and saw a newfound respect for himself in her eyes. Would it be there if he lied to her? Would it still be there if he told her that he had 2 children on the way? She might be accepting of his past affair, but he highly doubted she would accept his children from another woman. Tsunade's Senju did not seem that kind of woman to him. More than that, he could not trust her with this secret. Not yet, and certainly not with the lives of his children. So he decided to keep his silence. I cannot say if I can love you or not, princess. But I will give you the respect and consideration as my lawful wife, if you give me the same in return, he proposed. This was the best he could offer her at the moment. Tsunade, he blinked, unable to understand why she was smiling, and said her name. If you want us to treat each other as equals, then I would like you to call me by name. As I would do the same for you, Naruto, she proposed, looking at him hopefully. It felt strange to hear her calling his name. It sent a warm feeling through his chest for every other time she had mocked him by calling him Kinslayer. And if she was willing to take this first step, then so was he. Very well, Tsunade, he said with a small smile, it feels strange. As sitting beside each other like this, perhaps we are the first Senju and Uchiha to even sit like this without making any threats or slitting each other's throats, she realized out loud, her surprise easy for him to see. He fought back the urge to tell her that his grandfather had offered the same chance to her grandfather. An action for which his family was butchered. Was he committing the same mistake? Was he as deluded as his grandfather? He could only imagine the hell Tajima and Madara were going to give him for making this peace happen. It would be a miracle if they didn't tear him apart at first sight, and his best chance would be to convince his aunt to get him an audience with those two men. Naori was the most rational person in their family, and even if she hated the Senjus like Tajima, she would do anything to save their people from annihilation. So he sat there contemplating his fateful meeting with his family while carrying out mundane conversation with Tsunade. No great secrets or unbreakable love confessions were made, and it was most definitely not love at first sight. But the initial prejudices they had against each other greatly mellowed down, which was a significant achievement in his eyes. She even decided to call him by his name as he did the same for her. They both parted on this small but shared mutual agreement, feeling more at ease with each other than they were 2 hours ago. Shisui and Itachi both approached towards him as the Senjus retreated after their princess. Are the men ready? Asked Naruto seriously. They're, informed Shisui confidently. But they are not happy fighting beside enemies they have been battling for 1,000 years. Pointed Itachi flatly, without mincing any words about the true morale. Naruto winced, but it was not anything he hadn't expected. Well, if we don't figure out how to fight together, then 1,000 years from now our descendants would be calling us fools for not setting aside our differences in the face of slavery to civilians, spat Naruto. Think you can rally two bitter sides to fight for you? Challenged Shisui with a smirk. A cunning smile spread across Naruto's lips as an idea came to his mind in regards to this problem. Not for me. Naruto stared at the mixed bunch of ninjas standing before him in the vast training field. Usually, these men and women would be fighting to kill each other, but today they found themselves fighting side by side. The unlikely scenario was clear to see in the way every ninja was distrustfully glancing at the one of the other side. Tsunade and Itama were there as well to keep command over the 2,500 Senjus who were going to join the mission of seizing the capital. Aiding them were Naruto, the Kinsguard, and 500 Uchiha faction members mostly made up of Shimura, Namikaze and few Uchiha allies. Together, their force could muster a paltry 3,000-strong force that were supposed to go up against a force of 9,000-strong royal guards located across the city. Many of whom were former ninjas who took up service with the daimyo rather than serve any clans as individuals. The problem Naruto faced was not the overwhelming numbers of the enemy, but rather their wide distribution across the city, and he had a feeling traps would be already in place against anyone that tried to harm the royal family's rule. While majority of those 9,000 royal guards were samurai or normal guards whom ninjas could take on with ease, that fact was made near impossible for Naruto if his mixed forces didn't coordinate or trust each other on the battlefield. These ninjas may stand grudgingly beside each other now, but on the battlefield they would protect only their own, which would be a disaster in making for their combined side. Hashirama had taken 500 of his best soldiers with him, promising to capture the royal family. Naruto had offered some of his men to aid the Senju head but was refused since Hashirama didn't trust Uchiha not to slaughter the royal family. To pacify this refusal, Hashirama granted Naruto combined leadership over their united forces, with Itama acting as his second in command followed by Tsunade. It was a fair offer. But how was he supposed to lead these men when he couldn't even trust the majority of them not to stab him in the back? Well, this is the risk you took, whispered Kurama sarcastically. Naruto grimaced but nodded in acknowledgement. He could not use the fox's help or risk reducing the city full of innocents to ashes. He had to personally lead this small army, make sure they attacked only the soldiers, leaving the non-combatants alone, and not destroy their property even. It wouldn't be a good start to ninja rule if in the process they burned down the lives of innocent civilians. So many things to be taken care of by one man. No one ever said duty could be such a pain in the ass. With a deep breath and checking his golden armor and sword one last time, he stepped forward and looked sharply at the assembled army. They had already taken care of the sentries and the guards in the outermost sections of the royal castle, while Hashirama was currently busy making his way towards the royal family. So far, no noises were made, but he doubted that would remain the same for long. "I'll lead this attack," announced Naruto clearly for every person to hear. His supporters gave him proud nods and would readily fight for him. The Senjus and their allies on the other hand looked ready to maul him to death with their hard eyes. "Form up," commanded Naruto, and while his supporters followed the order readily, the other side still looked hesitant until one harsh glare from Tsunade made them follow through. Itama also said some encouraging words but was only heard by those most close to his position, leaving majority of his army clueless. Naruto sighed because this was so not happening before such an important battle. These people needed to understand what was at stake rather than their old rivalry. And there was only one way he could achieve that. He unleashed a mild force of his chakra, bringing all the attention back to himself before speaking loudly for everyone to hear. "They say I am a Kinslayer, the worst of the worst. But if you don't have the balls to fight against your common enemy, then that makes every one of you a coward," he yelled. Kurama grinned when he saw the boy's words ignited the fragile ego of every shinobi. Their mistrustful looks were now replaced by anger and a desire to pommel Naruto for his outrageous insult. If the boy didn't change the situation soon, they might very well do that. "The enemy outnumbers us, and shouldn't we try to find another solution with the daimyo?" asked one of the Senjus bitterly. "If we fight together, then I'll show you how we can win," said Naruto passionately. He saw many staring at him calculatingly. The Senjus and their allies might hate his guts, but they were aware of his past victories, and despite their grudges, many now seemed interested in listening to a proven commander even if he was an Uchiha. Naruto decided to use this golden opportunity quickly as he looked all of them in the eye. "Don't fight for me, don't fight for Hashirama or Madara. Don't fight for glory or riches, because we won't get any here." More and more ninjas were now stepping closer to him with intense look in their eyes. He didn't know if they wanted to listen or just wanted to stab him outright. "It is your freedom and independence the daimyo wishes to take. It is your settlements he wants to rule, your families he wishes to command, your women and children he wishes to lord over. If you bow to him now, your descendants shall be his slaves for eternity. Are you going to be cowards and allow a civilian to do that to you?" yelled Naruto fiercely. Every ninja's eyes were as hard as stone. Bloody murder was evident on their faces, an anger which neither Tsunade or Itama had ever seen before. Stunned, they looked at the man who had instigated such emotions within every Uchiha, Senju and their allies alike. Naruto unleashed dawn, earning surprised gasps from many who had not seen one of the most ancient weapons of the elemental nations. They all flocked even more closer to the boy in golden armor as he pointed his weapon at the vast capital ahead of them. "There are 9,000 strong men in this city," roared Naruto. His Sharingan came alive as he roared at the top of his voice by raising his sword high in the air. "Let's go kill them." For the first time in history, Uchiha and Senju gave out a ferocious single battle cry that was about to shake the foundations of the elemental nations. Naruto quickly jumped up to the walls of the royal castle as thousands of ninjas followed after him. He was thankful on seeing Mikoto still fighting for him despite what had happened between them. He was brought out of his thoughts when alarm bells finally went off across the city and the ninja army saw the first defenders rushing out. "This is going to be bloody," said Kagami with a grimace. "Hundreds will die, brother," said Shisui in a resigned voice, as he watched the royal defenders arriving in every street. "Thousands," whispered Kurama. Naruto was not undeterred by all those doubts and gloomy predictions, but unlike the others he didn't have the luxury to display any such thoughts. He looked at Tsunade, who gave him a resolute nod before looking at the assembled ninja army. Come with me and take this city. Chapter 20. Field of Fire. Tsunade along with her clansmen and allies alike had never in their wildest dreams imagined a day would come when they would be fighting side by side alongside Uchihas and their allies. But that day had come, and tonight their 3,000-strong combined force was currently charging towards the defenders of the strongest city of the world. Whatever she may think of the Uchiha, she couldn't deny the fact that their roars were as powerful as the dragons they claimed to descend from. It was enough to make the royal defenders flinch as they formed a great defensive line. Her sharp eyes didn't miss the dozen ninjas at the front, followed by heavy infantry in the middle and skilled archers at the back. Since the streets were narrow, many of the ninjas had decided to take up to the roofs, but their enemy had also positioned their own ninjas on the opposite side. It was as if the daimyo had trained his forces for fighting against ninja clans. Whatever the case, her eyes were now fixed on the one leading the charge. Riding atop his giant fox and dressed in his golden armor with dawn in his hand, Naruto Uchiha did strike as an intimidating warrior. He was quite far ahead of his army, leading the charge with his Kinsguard members right beside him mounted on their own horses. The enemy either considered the group foolish or suicidal, as a hail of burning fire arrows were launched by the royal archers. Tsunade didn't miss the seals carefully written on those arrows, and she had a feeling they were meant to make the arrows pierce shinobi armor. Yet Naruto and his group charged forward despite the hail of arrows descending down upon them. It was at that moment when the bloody fox that roared while looking up at the army of arrows, and not a second later that entire volley was shattered into metallic dust. The fox again gave a mighty roar, this time aimed right at the front line of the ninja defenders who were going through a set of hand seals. Tsunade's eyes nearly popped out from her sockets when she saw nearly 24 men and women go flying away from the force of that roar. The front line had cracked. In the meantime, Naruto and his squad had finished their hand seals. Fire style. Fire flame missile. All 6 Uchiha launched wild and searing flames from their mouth that took the shape of fire missile that tore clean through the enemy ranks, burning unfortunate royal soldiers that were caught in its grasp. What was more important was the attack was solely focused and spared any nearby buildings from catching fire. With their frontline ninja defenders sent flying away because of the fox, the royal army was left open and faced the brutal charge of the Kinsguard. The fox unleashed 9 long tails from its body, shattering the nearest poor souls before sending them flying away as if they were annoying flies. The remaining Kinsguard members charged after the beast, cutting down any royal defenders of the broken frontline lucky enough to survive the beast's wrath. By now the allied forces had reached the battlefield and clashed head-on with the 6 dozen ninjas of the daimyo who valiantly fought on. Their courage might have worked if they had more numbers and if they were not facing 2 of the strongest clans in the world and their allies. Tsunade herself launched a mighty punch on a ninja cocky enough to attack her. In his defense, the man raised his sword and was surprised when the weapon shattered against her punch, allowing her chakra-coated hand to tear his chest apart. His eyes widened in horror just before he was sent halfway across the city, where he splattered against the walls and splashed into hundreds of tiny pieces. A nasty grin arrived on her face as she watched every mercenary ninja of the daimyo shiver on the fate of their comrade. Even the Uchihas and their allies gulped at the sheer power of her fist. Instead of basking in the looks of awe and fear, Tsunade's sharp eyes narrowed when she saw 3 large armies made up of thousands of soldiers descending towards their position from 3 sides of the capital. "They're trying to box us in. Itama," she yelled. Her brother had just finished burying his sword in one of the enemy kunoichi's neck when he turned at her voice. On seeing what Tsunade was pointing, he grimaced. Tsunade watched her shy and reserved brother actually steel himself before glancing at his widely distributed troops. While it was true that she was the second in command of this army, Tsunade badly wanted her brother to regain his lost confidence. After his defeat against Naruto, his reputation had taken a severe beating in the clan, and this was his chance to regain his lost honor back. She was happy to give him this chance but would step forward if he couldn't do it. Fortunately, seeing Naruto's valiant charge had ignited some of the lost fire in the Senju boy's heart as he raised his sword. "Senju's with me," he yelled. Despite his past defeats, Tsunade's clansmen followed her brother's command and joined him as he personally led the charge against the army coming from the town square. Tsunade looked around the battlefield to gauge the situation. She was surprised to see Naruto and his squad along with some help from 100 Uchihas and Shimuras had nearly annihilated half of the enemy to the front. The Kinsguard had formed a protective circle around their leader as they all advanced forward, cutting down any and everyone with their swords. Her gaze shifted towards the man she was supposed to marry and she realized the tales about his prowess were not false. Naruto had dismounted from his fox's back, allowing the beast to run forward and wreak havoc. In the meantime, the second son of Tajima was channeling wind chakra through his ancestral weapon. Dozens upon dozens of royal guards had their armors pierced, heads chopped off, necks slashed, or limbs gone as they tried to stop the force that was Dawn or its wielder. Any who tried to attack Naruto from his blind spot got their heads chopped off through the blades of the Kinsguard, the most lethal of them being Shisui and Itachi Uchiha. That enemy flank was as good as massacred. Looking elsewhere, she saw two armies were still charging towards her positions from the markets and merchant district. She had roughly 1,000 warriors left with her since the remaining were currently busy fighting for Itama and a few for Naruto's side. Kenji, one of her old bodyguards, instantly stepped beside her. Currently in his 30s, this man had protected her when she was a babe and even now he was there for her when she needed him. Take 800 of our forces and stop the forces approaching from the merchant district. There could be ninjas among them, ordered Tsunade. Yes, princess. But what about the other force? Wouldn't you be outnumbered? I can easily see 2,000 warriors among them and you'll barely have 200 ninjas on your side. And that two Namikaze fighters who are sworn to Uchihas, warned Kenji worriedly, like Naruto said. We need to work together, besides I have a plan. Now go, commanded Tsunade, her voice leaving no room for any doubts or protests. Kenji flinched but did give her a dutiful bow before rallying the troops she had ordered and running towards the enemy approaching from the merchant district. Rest of you, with me, yelled Tsunade. The Namikaze fighters looked at each other first before glancing at Naruto, who was busy in his own battle. What probably made them follow a Senju was the presence of a dozen Senjus actually fighting beside Naruto. Tsunade grinned when they joined her as she led the charge, her hands already blurring through a set of hand seals. Summoning jutsu, the enemy army stopped in their tracks when a massive slug appeared right before them. They all glanced up at the blonde Senju woman standing on top of the creature, who stared back at them coldly. Shields up! Yelled the royal commander. The capital defenders joined together and raised their metal shields over their heads as a few soldiers broke from their ranks. Katsuyu, fire! Yelled Tsunade. The giant slug took in a deep breath before shooting off a massive barrage of acid from her mouth. However, before the lethal attack could hit the enemy, the few of their soldiers that had broken rank actually turned out to be ninjas who quickly slammed their hands on the ground. Earth style. Earth wall. Tsunade snarled when multiple layers of earth walls rose from the ground, covering the entire royal army contingent from the rain of acid fire. Katsuyu poured more of the lethal liquid, but as soon as she broke through one layer of wall, another was there to replace the lost one. They're trying to tire her out. Tsunade glanced at her own smaller forces and watched many Namikaze maintain a safe distance from the acid rain. But instead of standing idly, they were all hammering multiple explosive kunai on the enemy walls, but their attacks were having even less effect than Katsuyu's. She ordered her battle partner to stop her attack and waited for the enemy to take the bait. They didn't. The layers of earth wall were still standing strong despite the best efforts of Tsunade's forces. Once her forces were tired, the 2,000 warriors and ninjas would emerge from that shell and slaughter them with sheer numbers. Tsunade charged forward with a murderous battle cry as she jumped off from Katsuyu's head, going straight towards the earth walls. In the air, she backflipped herself, making her chakra-coated right leg slam at the center of the enemy defense formation. Crack! Several large cracks appeared all over the wall as Tsunade slammed into the structure with her entire force. Snarling furiously, she attacked the structure with her furious fists, making more and more holes appear everywhere. Katsuyu, breach! Her summon didn't give any verbal reply but instead unleashed several smaller versions of slugs from her body that Tsunade quickly caught in her arms. Without hesitation, she placed the creatures across many of the new holes in the earth wall as they all started to pour acid from their bodies. Even if the enemy could reform more and more walls to protect themselves, the temperature within the structure would increase very rapidly. It wouldn't be long before they would be forced to break out or die from the insufferable heat. Tsunade jumped off the wall and commanded her troops to take to the nearby roofs. When they were all clear, she performed a set of hand seals before slamming her hands on the ground. Earth style, star crater. The entire ground started sinking lower and lower as thousands of royal soldiers screamed in panic. Tsunade saw her troops had taken up positions across the rooftops and were now staring at the sinking ground. "Katsuyu, flood them now," yelled Tsunade urgently. The slug unleashed another massive river of acid from its mouth, flooding the core of the sinking ground first before focusing on making the escaping borders full of acid. Tsunade forced her summon to stop as she saw the enemy walls cracking now that the heat was unbearable for the royalists. They were about to be cooked alive from the heat of the smaller Katsuyus unleashing acid in their cracked walls. The walls cracked open urgently as thousands of panicked soldiers rushed out to save themselves. To their horror, they were now standing in the middle of a large crater full of acid, and the only way outside was crawling up towards the far street. All around them Namikaze shinobi were waiting for them at the nearest rooftops. Tsunade steeled herself when she looked at the Namikaze troops and then at the horrified royalists. Fire! Hundreds of shuriken and kunai were launched at the royalists. Those soldiers were yet to split up properly and as such were badly hit by the volley of weapons launched by accurate Namikaze ninjas. If that was not enough, Katsuyu's attack was the death blow. Tsunade closed her eyes when her summon unleashed massive quantities of acid on the trapped royalists. The trapped souls screamed in horror and agony as their skin started to melt before their very eyes. Those at the center of their formation were the first to burn alive. The few who managed to run towards the steep hill of the crater couldn't climb much farther as the Namikaze fighters massacred them all from their superior positions on rooftops with the help of kunai barrages. Long and painful minutes passed as Tsunade watched the entire enemy army massacred before her very eyes. To their credit, the royalists fought to the last man, and even in the face of annihilation they continued to struggle and try to get themselves out of the death trap. Many would call their actions folly, but Tsunade knew they were dying for someone they believed in. A massive river of acid had now flooded across the entire crater, and most of the royalists were floating lifelessly in the liquid, with many of the body dissolving slowly. The stench was horrible, with most of the dead having been killed by acid first before the kunai of the Namikaze warriors took their lives. Her eyes widened when a last group of royal soldiers charged straight towards her under the leadership of their commander. The officer had third-degree burns and his chest was marred with kunai, yet there was murder and determination in his eyes. The Namikaze ninjas reacted quickly and unleashed another rain of arrows towards the enemy group. It was the royal soldiers who valiantly stepped in between, taking the blows aimed for their commander and slumped lifelessly into the acid river. Tsunade's eyes widened when the enemy commander reached the edge of the crater. He was almost dissolving into the acid with half his legs gone, not to mention the continuous barrage of kunai hitting all over his body. The roar unleashed by the dying man sent shivers down Tsunade's heart, leaving her paralyzed as the man launched a mighty spear at her with full force. The Senju's eyes widened and she evaded the incoming weapon in the nick of time, only to realize it was never meant for her. The spear actually sailed high in the air before exploding right beside Katsuyu's left eye. The creature screamed as the explosive laced on the spear unleashed a mighty shockwave along with flames that consumed the entire eye along with half of the creature's face. Screaming in agony, it vanished in a puff of smoke, much to Tsunade's horror. Her murderous eye turned towards the man who had hurt her friend and saw the dying man grinning at her defiantly. He had now sunk to his knees into the acid river, with his body a picture of stabbed kunai and shuriken. Long live the daimyo! The man exploded himself with the help of hidden explosives inside his tattered uniform. While the explosion itself was small, the shockwave was wide, sending brutal tremors across half of the capital. Tsunade yelled in horror when dozens of Namikaze fell from the rooftops after suddenly losing their balance due to horrific shockwave. Their screams tore at her heart as they were all consumed in the acid river while they tumbled inside the crater, joining the dead royal soldiers. Victory was hers, but the enemy had not gone down without a fight. Itama Senju was chasing after the royal army alongside his own forces. It was a bizarre scenario which he had never imagined to happen. Instead of facing them openly, the royals had decided to run back towards the vicinity of the daimyo's castle. Itama had no choice but to follow or risk allowing them an opportunity to set another ambush. Looking at the daimyo's castle made Itama wonder about the safety of his brother. Hashirama was the strongest fighter he had ever seen, and he had almost 500 fighters helping him. Still, he could not help but worry for his brother and dearly wished they had Yamanaka in their forces right now, if only to help him learn if his brother was safe. He was disrupted from his thoughts when the royal army reached the gates and suddenly adopted a Tetsudo-like formation. Looking closely, he realized there was a thin barrier that would stop any jutsu being fired by his shinobi from long distance. The daimyo had went to great lengths to make his fortress very difficult to be attacked by shinobi from the outside. Still, to figure out such a strategy was not the work of any normal civilian commander. Itama looked at his own forces and saw he had roughly around 1,800 men with him. The remaining were away fighting for his sister and Naruto. The royal army had roughly the same number of forces, but still an uneasy feeling was emerging in Itama's gut. He cursed out loud when nearly 100 hothead Inuzukas charged forward without any warning. Itama yelled for them to come back, but it was too late as suddenly dozens of archers appeared on the castle walls. It was a trap. The Inuzuka force realized too late their own folly and paid for it with their lives as the royal archers mercilessly shredded them with hundreds of arrows. The royal army cheered as every single Inuzuka and their ninja dogs was butchered. Suddenly, two of the other gates of the royal castle opened up and Itama stiffened. From the eastern gate emerged hundreds of cavalrymen. Judging from their armor, they were veteran samurai trained to fight against shinobi. From the western gate emerged two entire platoons of massive war elephants with dozens of archers mounted on top of the beasts. If that was not enough, from Itama's rear emerged hundreds of civilian fighters armed with light swords, axes, and whatever weapon they could find. The defenders of the city were out for the blood of those who had threatened their leader's rule. The shinobi force buckled and started taking whatever little cover they could find as volley after volley of deadly arrows started raining down on them. Itama was trapped between the expertly crafted hammer and anvil of the enemy forces. Looking up at the castle walls, he was surprised to find a Nara commander looking down at him calmly. The Naras were said to be the best strategists in the elemental nations, and their entire clan was loyal to the fire daimyo for generations. Now they were repaying that loyalty when the daimyo needed it most. "We've got no chance," yelled several allied shinobi. Itama had to think fast or risk the annihilation of his entire force. If they were killed here, it wouldn't matter how strong Naruto or Tsunade were because they would be butchered against this organized army led by a capable Nara commander. Just looking at the charging war elephants stopped his heart several times. The beasts didn't care if they stepped over houses of nobles or crushed a few unlucky souls that got in their way. Their wide and dangerous tusks making quick work of any human that had the audacity to stop them. The royal army at the gate was slowly marching forward, leaving even less room for Itama's forces to maneuver. There were no high buildings nearby which the shinobi could use to escape, only small but lavish houses that could be easily destroyed by the war elephants. His army was wavering and none of his family members were here to save him. It was just him. He didn't know from where that courage came, but he looked at his fighters. "To me!" he yelled valiantly, despite the dire situation. Hundreds of Senjus rallied around him, followed by many Sarutobi and few Inuzuka that were still left. The few Uchihas clearly didn't want to follow him anymore, but seeing there was no other choice they did the same. Uchihas used fire to break the cavalry charge. "Inuzukas, you'll charge with me towards the gates," drawing the attention of the archers away from the Uchihas. Senjus and Sarutobis blocked the elephants with earth and water attacks. He unleashed his sword and took a deep breath before staring at the heavily organized royal army closing in and the archers ready at the castle walls. If this plan was to work, then he had to take the lead as a true leader would. "Follow me." Itama was the first to charge forward, and the brave roars of the Inuzuka fighters told him that they were following his lead. Maybe it was the sight of him charging bravely at the enemy army or some newfound motivation. Itama was glad to see his forces regain some of their vigor and run to carry out the objectives he had assigned to him. He couldn't think about failure right now as he finished performing a set of hand seals. Lightning style. Lightning stag. From his fingers, Itama unleashed gigantic beams of lightning that soon took the form of several massive stags with tall horns of the same element. The Senju were known for their fury, and there was no other animal Itama found more befitting to represent his rage. The beasts roared and charged forward, cackling devastating lightning bolts across the barrier protecting the royal forces at the gate. Within seconds, it shattered and the stags charged clean through the defensive enemy. The beasts were not alone as Itama heard another yell, Gatsuga. The Inuzuka force and their ninja dogs joined together to launch devastating tornado-like attacks that drilled massive holes in the enemy formation and butchered hundreds of royal soldiers on the spot. Those who survived the clash were soon being torn apart by the hungry ninja dogs. Their master's son joined them in the slaughter, tearing apart enemy forces and taking vengeance for the murder of their comrades. Itama blocked a sword from a royal soldier and batted away a spear aimed at his ribs. Turning around in a half-circle, he instantly spilled open the guts of a dozen royal soldiers that tried to corner him down. His eyes narrowed when he spotted several Inuzuka dogs and their masters getting cut down by the heavy fire from the royal archers on the walls. With a mighty roar, he jumped high in the air and unleashed a hail of kunai right at the castle walls. He grinned in satisfaction when the explosive tags on the kunai went off, shredding a third of the castle walls and burying many archers alive. Several others were caught up in the blast and had their limbs torn off. Some were caught on fire and were now running around in panic, spreading the deadly element among their disorganized comrades, creating even more havoc. Itama was relieved on seeing the Uchihas forming a single line against the approaching heavy cavalry of samurai. Their hands moved in sync as they all unleashed their attack at the same time. Fire style. Fire flame wall. A monstrous tidal wave of fire was unleashed by the Uchiha that roared furiously as it charged right towards the incoming cavalry. It burned houses and even the castle's walls, taking down many more archers in its rush to reach its target. The horses panicked on seeing the approaching fire and kicked off dozens of riders from their backs. The samurai in the middle and rear had to instantly rein their own beasts as their front line panicked and collapsed. They started to turn around in order to flee from the raging firewall, but were too late as the flames consumed them in a matter of seconds. Itama found himself cheering alongside the Uchihas as the entire samurai cavalry was consumed in flames. The dragon warriors roared before rejoining the battle at the gates, helping the Inuzuka slaughtering the diminishing royal foot soldiers. The archers on the wall were mostly dead, thrown off the walls, buried alive, or injured. The few still left alive were bravely doing their best to crush the enemy forces but were not able to make any decisive impact. The Senju commander continued fighting against his enemies in close combat while wondering about the plan of battle. Initially, it was agreed upon by both factions that only the daimyo's family should be secretly captured and the royal castle taken over. That would have been enough to pacify the thousands of defenders in the city, for they would not attack until the enemy had their liege lord hostage. But Hashirama pointed out that while the defenders would not attack, they would surely surround the ninja forces, preventing them from leaving or anyone from coming to their help. Leaving those soldiers alone also posed the risk of them calling for reinforcements and making the common civilians rise up in revolt. No ninja army could stand against more than 150,000 civilians and nearly 9,000 highly trained soldiers. It was why it was decided to not only capture the royal family but also subdue the city garrison that would allow the ninjas to assume complete control over the capital. But this plan had several fatal flaws. The most important one being the ninjas had underestimated the skill, tenacity, and loyalty of not only the city garrison but also those of the civilians loyal to the daimyo, and were now finding themselves trapped. Second error was the fact that the daimyo had not only prepared his city but also his forces in fighting against trained ninja forces. The presence of the Nara commander only added further problems for the ninjas. His intervention could be the reason as to why the allied ninja army's flag was yet to fly from the top of the castle. Third mistake was the presence of hidden special forces in the form of samurai cavalry and war elephants, which the daimyo had been expertly able to conceal from the ninjas for a long time. While the samurai cavalry was vanquished, Itama could only watch in horror as the war elephants continued their charge despite facing massive tidal waves of water launched by the Senju. The Sarutobi warriors uprooted the entire ground with the intent to make the elephants panic, but instead the beast madly charged forward without any thought for self-preservation. It was then the Senju commander noticed the shadows stretching from top of the beast to its legs. The ones controlling the beasts were now revealed to be Nara shadow binders supported by squads of archers. Hundreds of ninjas were either crushed alive or sent sailing away halfway across the city as the war elephants smashed into their lines. They were moving more rapidly and wildly than any animal of their kind ever had, which was another proof of the Nara's fine control. Whatever Senju or Sarutobi ninjas lucky enough to survive the rage of the beasts found themselves getting slaughtered by the hail of arrows launched by the enemy archers on elephant backs. Itama grabbed a nearby spear and made 10 earth clones of himself quickly. In front of his eyes, hundreds of his fighters were dying horrible deaths. They had followed him into this peril, and as their commander it was his responsibility to step up. No more running away, no more cowering in the shadow of his siblings. He had to act. The young Senju and his clone force charged forward and took up positions several feet away from the charging elephants. The Naras saw him instantly and focused their entire force in his direction. Itama took in a deep breath and controlled his nerves as he commanded his clones to raise their spears while he did the same himself. "Steady!" yelled Itama, as the beasts crushed a few more of his men. "Hold!" he commanded again, as his own clones gulped because the beasts were just about to reach them. "Take down the riders." No sooner had he given the command, Itama threw his chakra-coated spear right at the one who he assumed was the Nara officer leading this charge. The enemy ninja, realizing the threat, instantly moved out of the way but in turn lost his control, making his elephant crash against the one on his right. It was as if a tidal wave had been unleashed as one after another the war elephants started colliding with each other. They all gracelessly fell to the ground, burying most of their riders, including the Nara officers. The few who managed to remain standing were taken down by the hail of the chakra spears launched by the clone army of Itama. The ninja forces and royals alike were stunned at the display of valor and skill of one Senju. Itama was not done as he unleashed his sword and valiantly charged towards the downed beasts, intending to make sure they and their masters never rose again. The surviving Senju and Sarutobi were more than inspired by their leader's courage and followed after him. By the time they finished off the elephants and their riders, Itama found himself facing another grave problem. He grit his teeth in anger and frustration when he saw the Nara commander of the castle had personally arrived outside the gates. With his shadow binding, he had already took hold over the bodies of at least 10 Uchiha and 3 Inuzuka along with their dogs. He was making them attack Itama's remaining forces, creating more confusion and allowing the remaining royal foot soldiers and archers to hammer down more casualties. "Let's kill the bastard fast," proposed one of the Senjus. "Before he falls he'll make sure to butcher the Uchiha and Inuzuka under his control," warned a Sarutobi frustratedly. "Who cares? Let those dragon bastards die," yelled another Senju. "What about the Inuzuka? They are our allies, or are you craven enough to let them die willingly?" shouted another. Mayhem broke across his divided forces, with each ninja proposing more and more radical suggestions. But if one thing was common was the fact that for the price of the Nara commander's life, the Senjus and Sarutobis were willing to sacrifice every Uchiha in their force. This was exactly the kind of scenario Naruto had warned them about. One which could threaten their entire mission and get them all killed. "Shut up and follow my lead," barked Itama furiously, never having used such a murderous tone in his entire life. But right now he didn't care. His men flinched on seeing the raw fury blazing in his eyes. He couldn't believe the nerve of his own men. There were Namikaze fighters currently fighting beside his sister. If those Uchiha bannermen could put aside their differences and actually work side by side with Tsunade herself, then these men had no reason to betray their allies. Hashirama would never forgive him if he let their allies die needlessly. Most of all, Itama could never forgive himself if he didn't stop this. When he charged towards the last enemy forces, the Nara commander immediately noticed him and made sure to send every Uchiha and Inuzuka under his control straight towards Itama. A sly grin came on the Senju's face as he decided to take a page out of Naruto's book. Having personally experienced the power behind this move, he knew how much he needed to apply his power. When the Uchihas and Inuzuka fighters got close to him, Itama fired bolts of lightning from his hands, striking every one of them in non-vital body parts but with enough force to shock their brain. The Nara commander grimaced when his pawns fell unconscious with minor burns, the shock to their neural system enough to make them black out. Naruto had used more than a dangerous amount on Itama. Fortunately for the young dragon, his former enemy was not that vengeful or his people would be dead tonight. The two armies clashed against each other as Itama reached the Nara commander. He was older than him by at least a few years and his face was marred by nasty scars which proved he had faced more war than Itama had years. Itama knew the Nara would force him to engage in long-range combat in order to try to capture him with his shadow binding technique. His only option was to get close quickly and finish off the man. Just when he was about to move, his eyes widened in shock. One of the Inuzuka dogs leapt out of nowhere and brutally tore apart the head of the enemy commander in a gory manner. The headless body slumped gracelessly to the ground. The remnants of the royal forces could only watch in despair as their commander was brutally murdered in the chaos. If that was not enough to break their morale, the cacophony of war horns and a very familiar war cry shattered their last courage. Fire and blood. The war cries could be heard even so far away from the gates because they were being yelled out by thousands of bloodthirsty warriors. Itama had known this could happen, but he never actually imagined those bloody dragons would come through. Whatever miracle happened, it was the death knell for the royals because Madara Uchiha was here with the entire Uchiha army. Tajima watched his eldest son dismount from his horse and was soon surrounded by various clan heads. The Uchiha patriarch could have taken the lead, but their people had chosen Madara as their Hokage. This was his son's moment to show their people that their faith was not misplaced. They were all stunned when they received the urgent message from Naruto stating that conflict was imminent as the daimyo had been already making steps to take Naruto hostage the moment the Uchihas refused. Madara marched his entire army hard and fast to the capital before the royals could lay a hand on his last sibling. It was a mistake. Tajima glanced at their vast army and saw nearly a third of their fighters were tired after having ran from the river to the capital in a span of 2 hours. A journey which would usually take 8 hours. While the veterans looked a bit tired, they were still ready enough to fight. The same could not be said of their most inexperienced and youngest fighters who looked ready to fall dead. Now they had to lay a siege to the strongest city of the world with such a force. Still, Tajima knew he could not make Madara's choices for him or the boy would never learn how to lead. His victories or losses should be made on his decisions and not on Tajima's instructions. Still, he wished the boy would show restraint in the future. While it was true Naruto's life was in danger, the boy was not alone. He had 500 of their most loyal bannermen with him who would defend him to their deaths should the daimyo make any move against him. But Madara didn't listen, his love for his brother overriding his rational sense of properly leading his army. Despite the tactical error, Tajima could not openly blame the boy because it would be hypocrisy, as he would be doing the same thing as Madara if it was Naori in Naruto's situation. Command any fighter in our army who has an aerial summon to call their beast. We shall send in a small force that will open the gates. Commanded Madara. Shin Aburame demurely nodded in confirmation as he went out to find the said ninjas. Have the Kurama Fuinjutsu masters start working on disabling the seals on the city walls that prevents our ninjas from scaling them. If that fails, then we'll tear those bloody walls apart. Yelled Madara furiously. Hokage-sama. Why are there no defenders arriving to stop us? Asked Rei Namikaze suspiciously. Madara glanced at the tall city walls and activated his Sharingan. It was true, there were no defenders manning even an inch of those walls. There should be an entire city garrison ready to greet his army on first sight. He closed his eyes and let his senses flow. At first there was nothing, but as he concentrated more he sensed the disturbance, the sound of steel clashing, the cries of the dead and dying. They are already attacking my brother. Hissed Madara murderously. He turned towards his most loyal bannerman and saw the man look at him with full confidence. Tear these bloody walls apart. And get me a damn bird, I'm going in. Commanded Madara. Tajima quickly stepped forward to intervene. Madara, don't be hasty. Naruto can take care of himself for a while and you need to lead this army through this siege. Break the gates or scale the walls, whatever you do. Don't abandon your forces to the task and rush in like that. Chastised Tajima. Yet even so he carefully chose his words in order to not diminish the authority of his son in front of all their allies. A siege will take too long to break. How can I leave my brother out there to die? Asked Madara worriedly. Your love for your brother will be the end of you someday, Madara. Tajima desperately wanted to say those cruel words to his son for making such a grave mistake. But he had to restrain himself and think about how to convince Madara to act like a leader and not like a worried elder brother. "It's not going to be a siege, Hokage-sama," whispered Rei Namikaze. Madara and Tajima both turned around to see what had made the Namikaze leader go so pale. The voice reached them first before the sight. The Uchiha leadership and their 10,000-strong army could only watch in dismay as thousands of horses broke out of the forest. All of them carrying the royal banners, but it was the one leading them that made them shiver. A deer. In the thousands of years of clan wars, numerous attempts had been made by both Uchiha and Senju to gain the loyalty of one clan by force, negotiations, bribe and threats. Every attempt had ended in utter failure. No matter their power, numbers or skilled warriors, no Uchiha or Senju clan head had ever been able to bring this clan to their knees. It became an impossible task when the said clan swore loyalty to the daimyo and received his protection, leaving them out of the grasp of their enemies. They were not the strongest fighters of the world, but they had a power not even Tajima could dismiss. The Uchiha clan head clenched his fist when he saw Dane Nara at the head of this army that only seemed to grow larger and larger as more and more royal fighters came running out of the forests. At least 5,000 samurai cavalry, 3,000 archers, 12,000 infantry, and another 6,000 or so bunch of mixed fighters carrying the emblems of shogun or mercenary armies. Among this vast sea of royal forces, there were also nearly 4,000 Nara fighters rushing towards the battlefield. It was a trap and they all fell for it. Tajima bitterly smiled at the ingenuity of the man he was here to depose. From one hand he offered a choice of slavery, and with his other he prepared a sword to stab into the hearts of his enemies should they refuse. The said sword was the entire royal army led by the Nara clan that now surrounded the enemies of the royal family. Naori glanced at her brother in alarm. Even if she was not a military strategist, her eyes could see the 10,000-strong Uchiha army was now facing a 30,000-strong royal army of the daimyo led by one of the most feared clans of the world. They literally had their backs against the wall facing an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1, which was not taking into account the summoning creatures that would be unleashed, the nasty tricks the Naras would definitely play, or the possibility of the city defenders striking them from the back. The Uchiha army was now trapped between the hammer and the anvil. Madara's face was blank for several long moments, even as his supporters looked at him for an order. And then the newly appointed Hokage smirked. Naori shivered when Madara unleashed his sword and gunbai at the same time. Following his lead, almost every Uchiha who all loved Madara unleashed their weapons, forcing their allies to do the same. She looked at Tajima to stop this madness, for no matter their skill or courage, they would all be slaughtered here to the last man because of the sheer numbers the enemy had brought with them. But then she realized they had already rebelled against the daimyo. If they surrendered right now, their fate would be worse than death. She looked at the capital and could only pray for the safety of her trapped nephew, because it didn't look like they would be able to help him anytime soon, if ever. Not even Kami could save them from their doom, but it didn't stop Naori from unleashing her own sword as Madara charged forward and was joined by thousands of his forces. "Let's show these weaklings how to dance," barked Madara with a laugh, his battle lust taking him over. While the Uchihas understood the joke and laughed like their bloodthirsty leader, their allies could only hesitantly prepare themselves as the enemy army started to spread out in order to encircle them. Both armies were now rushing towards each other in a mighty clash that would soon change the course of history for either side. Until thousands of warriors from both sides lost their balance as a massive tremor passed across the land. The next moment there was a monstrous sound of a horrible explosion which instantly shrouded the entire battlefield in dust and smoke. Madara and Tajima stopped each other from falling. When they were sure of their footing, they looked at their rear from where the explosion had come from. The entire area near the city walls was now shrouded in dust and debris. However, Madara with his Sharingan saw what others didn't, and he froze. His shock was soon passed among his family and entire army alike. Even the enemy forces that were previously confident of their victory now started taking several steps back in horror. As the dust cleared, a mighty roar shook the entire landscape. A roar which had not been heard in 1,000 years. Naori fell to her knees as she saw the monstrous shadow step out of the dust. The first thing everyone noticed was its sheer size and demonic eyes that glared at all of them as if they were pesky insects. Its massive 9 tails were unleashed in every direction, threatening to crush this entire land with one swing. But what brought nearly half of both armies to their knees was not the beast's size, but the unending hatred and anger that threatened to burn them all in a never-ending inferno. "I don't believe it all this time," whispered Tajima in awe. Madara was the first to catch sight of a shining glint on top of the beast with his Sharingan. He could never fail to recognize that sword, nor could he not recognize the man in golden armor bearing the dragon on his chest. The lone warrior was murderously glaring at the royal army. "A Biju," whispered Naori in fear. "Naruto." Madara's declaration shocked each and every clan head and ninja alike, as they all now saw the youngest son of Tajima standing atop the massive 9-tailed fox. And his eyes were as cold as ice. They all watched the young dragon raise his sword and point it straight at the stunned form of Dame Nara, the enemy commander. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. The reply from the royal army commander would be pondered over by historians for several centuries, because instead of doing what most would expect from a Nara in this situation, Dame picked himself up from the ground and grabbed a nearby sword, calmly pointing it straight at Naruto. Nor would any historian or shinobi alike ever forget the young dragon's words. Charge, Kurama. Chapter 21. The End of an Era. Naruto stared at the enemy commander, who glared at him defiantly. But instead of arrogance, he saw the grim determination in Dame Nara's eyes. The clan head was well aware that a defeat here or retreat could spell the end of not just the daimyo's rule but his entire dynasties, and if those monarchs fell from power, then the Nara clan would lose their protection, making them open targets for the Uchiha and Senju. Those two ancient clans had not forgotten the everlasting defiance the Naras had shown to them over the thousands of years, and would make them pay for it dearly in blood, if not outright annihilation. Even the samurai's livelihood depended on their service to the daimyo. If that man's rule was overthrown, then they would become jobless and always be looked down upon by shinobi. They had no choice but to fight. The same was not the case for the common civilian soldiers, shogun and mercenary warriors. These thousands of fighters were trained to defeat great armies and even ninjas, but none of them had the first idea as to how they could defeat a Biju. They would all be massacred before they could even harm a hair on Kurama's body, and their fear was clearly evident for Naruto to see. Still, their commander had decided to fight, and it was their obligation to follow him no matter the consequences. Despite the perilous situation, the 5,000-strong samurai heavy cavalry was the first to charge on Dame Nara's command in order to stop Kurama, who was charging towards the royal army. It was a sight not a single person present here would ever forget. No matter how hopeless the situation was, the samurais charged forward with hundreds of them slashing their swords trying to take out Kurama's legs. To their dismay, not even a single sword could make a tiny scratch on the Biju's tough legs. Naruto grimaced when Kurama roared furiously before smashing his tails wildly over the samurai cavalry. Within seconds, hundreds of samurai and their poor warhorses were being crushed to death. So bad was their fate that not even a body was left to recover by the time Kurama pummeled them into the bloodied ground. He should be feeling overjoyed on seeing his enemies die like flies, but the sight only filled him with more sadness, as these brave men were dying for a lost cause. He heard Kurama roar murderously as hundreds of Nara attached their shadow binding technique all over the Biju's legs. "Now it ends," whispered Naruto. The furious Biju opened its mouth, and to the horror of the Naras they saw that while their shadows had trapped the beast for now, it had not allowed them any control over the beast's other actions. A fact they realized too late as Kurama started creating a massive Bijudama. The royal army paled and most of the mercenary ninjas started fleeing instantly, so did many civilian soldiers. They had lost what little courage they had left on seeing the monstrosity the beast was about to unleash. Even if they couldn't feel chakra, they could see what was about to unleashed was big. And then something happened. Madara was witnessing the most memorable battle of his life. His eyes could not believe the power of his brother's pet beast, which was just about to go up another notch as it started forming a Bijudama until Naruto knelt and placed a hand on his friend's head. The Biju stopped. No words were spoken, but the massive ball of chakra being created by the fox shattered. The fox sighed but nodded in resignation as Naruto jumped off the beast and landed gracefully across the battlefield. The remaining samurai cavalry flinched at the sight of him, and even if they wanted to attack him, Kurama's menacing eyes dared them to do such a thing and face the penalties. Tajima and many other Uchiha growled in frustration when Naruto started walking towards Dane Nara and his army. "Honorable fool," hissed Tajima. But before he could move to save his idealistic son, it was Naori who placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't," she warned, "he'll get himself killed," said Tajima heatedly, earning a nod from Madara, who also looked ready to charge in order to protect his brother. Naori watched her youngest nephew walk calmly towards the enemy army. She had watched this boy grow up before her, and what she saw today was not something she had ever seen before. "You have grown up, Naruto. He knows what he's doing. Trust him," she declared, leaving no room for doubt, making Tajima and Madara sigh, but they did step down, making the others do the same as all their eyes shifted towards the boy in golden armor who stepped towards Dane Nara. Both armies watched the Nara commander and Uchiha stand before each other at a respectable distance. "Quite a beast you got there," commented Dane without any sarcasm. The man was simply stating the hard and bitter fact. "That I have," agreed Naruto, keeping his face set in stone. "Why are you here?" asked Dane curiously. "Look at your men." The Nara commander was forced to look at the now 22,000-strong royal forces that were still standing with him. The rest had either fled or were simply butchered by the fox. In each and every person's eyes he saw fear, doubt and despair. "I don't want to slaughter men needlessly," said Naruto honestly, making the Nara commander sigh. "You know I have no choice but to fight," replied Dane bitterly. "What if you don't have to?" questioned Naruto sincerely. Dane blinked and looked at the young Uchiha before him. There was not a shred of treachery or hidden agenda in those eyes. "This boy. Neither Uchiha or Senju will spare us if the daimyo is overthrown. My people weren't exactly known to be either clan's lapdogs. We valued our independence then and we still value it now. Besides, your father and Tobirama Senju are not known for showing mercy to those who have defied them," pointed Dane Nara frankly. Dane waited for the boy to refute the accusations he had laid against Tajima or even Tobirama. To his surprise, Naruto never flinched and looked him right in the eye. "Then retain your independence. Serve neither Uchiha or Senju but whoever is chosen the next ruler of the Land of Fire. Bend the knee and your clan lives, your soldiers live, your people live," promised Naruto. Dane glanced at Tajima nervously as the Uchiha clan head was glaring at him with cold murder in his eyes. "We all know what your father did to Kento Senju's family," said Dane worriedly. "I am not that man." Dane could not help but admire the conviction in those eyes and the sincerity burning in them. He glanced at Tajima again but then looked at Naruto, who never looked away from him. Dane saw Kurama actually nod, much to his shock, suggesting the beast actually supported the boy's offer. Whatever Tajima or Tobirama were capable of, the nine-tailed fox could surely do more harm should he be insulted. And the only way that could happen was if Dane refused this Uchiha before him. Dane looked at his own clansmen and the royal army soldiers. Most of them nodded as he closed his eyes and looked at Naruto with a resigned smile on his face. "I never thought I would ever see an Uchiha with honor," said Dane, making Naruto's lips twitch into a faint smile. "Let's end this senseless bloodshed," proposed Naruto, as he extended his hand towards the Nara. The said man glanced at him one last time before raising his own hand and joined it with Naruto's. Under these terms, I surrender," declared Dane loudly for every soldier to hear. Madara and his entire army could only gape in shock as one by one each and every royal soldier threw down his weapon and knelt, marking their official surrender. He actually saw the fox smile when Naruto turned back and walked towards his family's army. Naori wanted nothing more than to hug the boy standing before her. It was one thing to mercilessly slaughter one's enemy when your victory was assured, but an entirely different matter when you offer that defeated enemy a chance to surrender peacefully. It was a double-edged sword with many risks. History was proof of success and failures behind such moves. Naruto could have wiped out the entire enemy army with the help of his Biju, but he showed mercy. What consequences it would have for him and their people was something only the future would tell them. She restrained herself from hugging the boy as he was currently staring at Tajima, Madara, and all the clan heads along with their entire army right in the eye. Gone was the look of a devoted Uchiha who would do anything for his clan. These were now the eyes of a man who had committed himself to a cause. The daimyo has been captured. The city has fallen and the royal army has surrendered. We have won, declared Naruto calmly. Shock and disbelief ripped through the Uchiha army on hearing those words. They all had came here prepared for a bloody fight only to realize that it was already over. Many glanced at the massive fox, a beast that dangerous could have reduced the city to ashes, and yet the capital was still standing, which could only mean Naruto took it by force. While the young dragon was a brave and skilled man with an army of 500 fighters, he would have to go through thousands of royal guards. A feat impossible to accomplish unless he used the beast, or… Tajima was the first to arrive at this conclusion as he narrowed his eyes dangerously at his youngest son, who had the grace to gulp nervously. "You have a lot of explaining to do, boy," warned Tajima. "Yes, father," agreed Naruto reluctantly. Despite his great victory, the cold glare of his father made him feel like the young boy from his past. Tajima could be very intimidating when he wanted to. Backed by an entire army, the same man could prove disastrous. Naori sensed the rising tension in the air and decided to quickly intervene. Just one glance at Naruto's nervous gaze was enough to show her the boy had done something very bad. Knowing Tajima, he would lash out quickly, and that would not bode well for Naruto's reputation, which was skyrocketing these days among their faction. After seeing what power he was capable of displaying with the Biju, it was best for their faction if they listened to the boy and not alienate him. "We shall talk, but not here. Understood?" she commanded, looking at all the clan heads and her own family. Surprisingly, it was Madara who was the first to agree, which made everyone else fall in line as well. The young Hokage was glancing at the giant fox with a gleam in his eye which Naori didn't miss. The same was the case for many of the more militaristic clan heads. The only thing keeping them from just outright grabbing the beast was Naruto's presence and the prior memory of what the fox could do if enraged. Tajima finally gave a nod, but never once did his cold and merciless eyes leave his son's. "You took it upon yourself to ally us with our sworn enemies?" Not one man in the large hall didn't flinch on hearing Tajima's thunderous roar. The Uchiha patriarch was fuming in anger, his murderous eyes glaring at his youngest son standing in the center of the hall with a composed look on his face. Naruto held his ground despite the heated glares he received from the various clan heads, not to mention from his own father and brother. Even Naori was taken aback by his choice. The only one standing beside the boy was the fox, who had reduced himself to the size of a small wolf, much to the amazement of the ninjas present in the room. When their force had marched through the city, they had seen the carnage it had gone through and the dead littering in the streets. Still, the bloodshed was minimal, with only 800 allied ninjas dead in comparison to the 8,500 royal guards and 400 civilians. Hundreds more were injured, but the daimyo was taken prisoner and his 3 sons died trying to defend the royal monarch despite Hashirama's best efforts. Most had expected Tajima to instantly attack the weakened Senjus, and probably the Uchiha patriarch would have done so had he not received a pointed stare from the monstrous Biju that made him back down and agree to talk first before waging war again. Still, the capital was tense as a cold war had erupted between the Senju and Uchiha factions. The only thing keeping them from jumping at each other's throats was the presence of the Biju and the responsibility of watching over the surrendered royal army and the Nara clan. In a matter of hours, the oldest dynasty to rule the Land of Fire had been overthrown. But it didn't matter to Tajima and his supporters, for all they were seeing right now was a foolish boy who not only agreed to marry a Senju but also robbed them of their rightful vengeance. It didn't matter to them that most of them along with their people would be dead by the time the last Senju was killed. Even Madara was for once in agreement with his father, which did not bode well for Naruto. "I did what I thought was right," said Naruto tiredly. "I can have you beheaded for this," replied Tajima coldly. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. His father was many things, but never once had he made such a threat. A fact which had shocked not just him but every person in the room. It went to show how deep the man's hate for the Senjus went. "Father, show too much kindness to your enemies and you'll wake up one day to find your throat slit," barked Tajima. "Father's right, Naruto. The Senjus are weak right now. Together without army and the fox we can defeat them," urged Madara passionately, earning many nods from the clan heads. Kurama snorted in disgust, which made Madara narrow his eyes, for his brother had not rebuked the beast for that audacity. "They killed our brothers, Naruto," said Madara sadly. The faces of 3 young boys flashed before Naruto's eyes, and for a moment he wanted nothing more than to join Madara. But then he also the faces of two unborn girls that were yet to see the world. Could he allow them to feel the pain he had? Could he willingly let them be born into this savage world? Could he allow them to watch their siblings die for a petty feud? He and everyone else in the room got his answer when his Sharingan came alive and a monstrous killing intent was unleashed. I'm tired of fighting. His outburst stunned not only his family but all their bannermen. His furious eyes glared at all of them, which made many flinch and made Tajima as well as Madara shut their mouth. Never before had they seen this look in Naruto's eyes. The look of a man haunted by death, war and misery along with unbearable pain. It's all I have done since I came into this world. I've killed men and women. I've burned clan heads alive. I have given orders that lead to the slaughter of entire clan to the last child. Yelled Naruto disgustedly, "You're no son of mine," whispered Tajima in disbelief, not knowing how much it hurt his son. "I am your son, father. I am more like you than any of your children. It is why I know that the best course of action for our people is to make peace. If not for ourselves then for our children," pleaded Naruto. Suddenly, Madara got up from his chair and briskly walked towards his sibling. Everyone tensed and Kurama even stepped forward growling at the approaching Uchiha. To the beast's surprise, Madara not only ignored him but brushed past him to grab Naruto by the collar of his shirt. Naruto had never seen his brother so furious and disappointed at the same time. Madara would die for him without hesitation, but right now his brother looked about ready to kill him. "Give me one reason why I should not kill you right now? Tell me why you are doing this, because I know you desire revenge as much as me for what they did to our brothers. For what they did to Izuna," whispered Madara fiercely, his Sharingan glaring heatedly at those of his brothers. Naruto looked at his brother and he saw Madara was not joking around. His brother loved him, but what he was asking was everything Madara had desired in his entire life. If he tried to take that away without a just reason, Madara would not kill him, but no longer would his brother love him. A blow which would be the death of Naruto himself. Closing his eyes, he leaned closer so that he was near his brother's ear. "You're going to be an uncle, brother." Madara stepped back as his eyes went wide, unable to believe what he just heard. Naruto had kept a lot of secrets from him over the years, the most dangerous being the fact that he had a Biju following him around for years. But this was even bigger than that. But it did explain why he wanted to make peace with the Senjus. "You're not lying to me?" asked Madara seriously. "No," whispered Naruto defeatedly. Kurama was gaping at his friend for revealing his most important secret to someone like Madara. He had never trusted the eldest son of Tajima. The thirst for power and revenge was clear to see in those eyes. While Naruto reminded the fox of Indra when the Uchiha founder was a boy, Madara reminded the fox of the power-hungry man Indra became. Still, for Naruto's sake he had tolerated Madara, but if he or as a matter of fact anyone else tried to harm the boy, then they would feel his true wrath. Kurama was not blind as to how much Naruto had sacrificed for this peace. How much the boy was risking to stop this unending war. No ordinary man could have done such things. In the boy, Kurama saw hope for humanity for the first time, and he would be damned if he let these fools take that away from him. But he was surprised when Madara, instead of lashing out at his brother, actually sighed. He looked a lot older right now than he actually was. "Our people chose me as Hokage, brother. You think the Senjus will still want peace when they learn this? Would they still desire peace when the Uchiha don't give them leadership over the land of fire because father will die before he lets that happen?" asked Madara seriously. "I'll find some way, brother. But I cannot do it alone. You once promised me that it will always be you and me against the entire world. For your sake, I remained loyal to this family and our clan even after what happened that night. I have fought for you my entire life. But now I need you to fight for me again," explained Naruto honestly, his eyes becoming moist. Madara flinched as he was reminded of the pact he and Naruto had made to each other when they were young boys who had just lost their brothers. Naruto had kept that promise just as he had kept every other promise, and so had Madara. But this went beyond everything Madara could have ever imagined. He looked at the fox and saw the beast was ready to jump at this throat should he attack Naruto, but the fox didn't have to worry. Without another word, the eldest son of Tajima walked away from the hall, much to Naruto's shock. The boy's shoulders slumped as he realized this was his defeat. "You are all fools." His eyes widened when Kurama stepped forward and spoke for the first time. Every person in the room stared in shock on hearing the beast actually speak the common tongue. Tajima went pale and so did his sister. Kurama saw Naruto urging him not to reveal his true power and it made him even more grateful to the boy. Even now at the brink of losing his family and allies, Naruto had not revealed Kurama's identity to his people. It had been the Biju who had offered his help to crush the royal army while Naruto wanted to find another way. Even against Madara, Naruto had not revealed Kurama's true mission or the extent of his powers. You truly kept your promise, Naruto Uchiha. Now it is time I keep mine. What are you? Whispered Tajima, bringing Kurama back from his thoughts. He ignored Naruto's pleading gaze to stop and instead walked towards the Uchiha clan head. Several guards bravely or foolishly stepped in his way but were waved away when Tajima dared to look the beast in the eye. Contrary to what you think, I am not a mindless beast. I was created by the Sage of Six Paths. I was there when your ancestor Indra was born. I was there when he waged war against his brother that has been going on till this day. And if you think for 1 second that I will butcher Senjus just because you want it, then you are a moron. Barked Kurama. What? Hissed Tajima furiously. I don't fight for the Uchiha and I don't fight for the Senjus either. I am loyal to my only friend who saw me as a person and not as a weapon. He remained loyal to me all these years and in turn I have remained loyal to him and will remain so until his last day. You all have lost a lot to this war, but so have the Senjus. The only thing that can come out of this war is the end of both clans and their allies, warned Kurama. I will not stop until I make those bastards kneel before me and then take their lives for what they did to my family. Roared Tajima. If looks could kill both the fox and the Uchiha patriarch should have burned each other to death. All the clan heads were silently watching this match, dreading the conclusion. Kurama restrained himself from killing this man right here. So blinded by hate was this human that he couldn't even make decisions that were best for the future of his children. Enough. Naori Uchiha walked towards her brother and laid a firm hand on his shoulder. Tajima glanced at her steely gaze and took a step back as the Uchiha woman stepped before Kurama. What do you want, Fox? Asked Naori calmly. At least hear out what the Senjus have to say. Try to make peace as your father did, urged Kurama, as both Tajima and Naori stiffened. How? I told you I have been here in this world for a long time. Your father was a good man and one of the finest Uchiha leaders I ever saw in history. What happened to him was wrong and you made the Senjus pay for that dearly. But if you continue this war, then your children will suffer just like you have. And so will their children after them, explained Kurama honestly. Naori glanced at her nephew and saw the pain in his eyes. She and Tajima had lost their siblings early in their life, but Madara and Naruto had watched their brothers die when they were merely young boys themselves. Those two had seen more death and suffering than either she or her brother ever had. The only reason they had survived was the fact that they were strong and remained united. A fact which could change on the decisions made today. Very well. We'll listen to what the Senjus have to say, declared Naori. Sister, barked Tajima in anger, but was again silenced when she ignored him and looked straight at the fox. And if we don't find their terms satisfactory then the war continues, with or without your help, Fox, warned Naori, earning a snort and a nod from the beast. That's all I can ask, grunted Kurama, as he marched back towards Naruto. The boy looked at his aunt but she shook her head making him sigh as he left the hall. Naori soon commanded the remaining clan heads to leave them and when they were gone she turned towards her furious brother. We need to talk. Hashirama had been nervously pacing in his room with his siblings watching him worriedly. They had won the capital and now the city was theirs. Many good men and women died for that but the daimyo was a prisoner now along with his wife and daughters. The Fire Lord's sons chose to die fighting than let their father be overthrown. Hashirama was too late to stop them from dying. He had watched Naruto unleash the Biju against the royal army and Nara's. Hashirama had dreaded that the boy would wipe out all those people mercilessly like any Uchiha would. What happened next was not something Hashirama had expected from any Uchiha, much less Naruto. The boy gave the enemy a chance to surrender, saving thousands of lives, and in doing so preserved the future of all the millions of families of those royal soldiers. He made the Uchihas back down and even got them into a room to negotiate peace with the Senjus. But now he was worried for the boy. Hashirama knew what kind of man Tajima was and many lords who followed him were just as ruthless and vicious, They could very well kill the boy for robbing them off their revenge. The only thing that gave Hashirama hope was Madara's presence in the room. As long as Madara was there, nobody would dare lift a finger at his only surviving brother. He was brought out of his thoughts when the door of his room was slammed open. His siblings unleashed their weapons when they saw the Senju guards outside had dropped unconscious as the striking form of Madara Uchiha approached towards them. Hashirama could not help but feel happy and even more worried at the same. It was so good to see his old friend, but one look in his furious eyes was enough to make Hashirama tense. Without warning, Madara cast a scathing glance at Tsunade and Itama. "Get out!" The two Senjus blinked at the audacity of this Uchiha, but Hashirama saw how tense his friend was, and if disobeyed then he might very well resort to violence to make that happen. So he curtly gestured to his siblings to comply. They grumbled but obeyed his commands and walked outside the room. But Hashirama knew they were not far away, waiting to come to his aid if Madara turned hostile. "It's good to see you, Madara," said Hashirama with a true smile. "Wish I could say the same," grunted Madara, as he deactivated his Sharingan. Hashirama silently waited as he saw Madara pace across the room without speaking. This went on for a few long moments before the Uchiha looked at him seriously. "My brother is a good man, Hashirama," said Madara, and was surprised when Hashirama nodded with an even wider smile. "He's the best of your people," praised Hashirama, which only made Madara grimace. "Good men don't survive in this world, Hashirama. Only the worst do," replied Madara sadly, as the faces of his dead brothers flashed before his eyes. "Not if they have the support of others," countered Hashirama, earning a bittersweet chuckle from his dark-haired friend. "Neither of us have changed. We are like ice and fire." Hashirama froze as realization struck him. The Uchihas were always like the fire, dangerous, swift and all-consuming. Their love was as fierce as their hatred, their sanity as great as their madness, their courage as great as their arrogance. The Senjus on the other hand were like ice, long-lasting, enduring and unending. Their silent fury as great as their gentle hearts, their calmness as dangerous as their ability to create storms. The savior shall be born by the joining of two ancient elements. Hashirama still remembered that old Toad's prophecy revealed to him a few years ago. The frog had been vague and smiled at him when Hashirama said he didn't understand. The only thing the geezer had told him to not fight fire with fire but calm it with ice. Hashirama hadn't understood then, but he did now. "You once told me there is nothing in this world more precious to you than your last brother," said Hashirama seriously. "It was then and it remains the same now," agreed Madara, despite the tense situation. This Uchiha had many faults, but if one thing Hashirama had always admired about Madara was his love for his siblings. There was not anything this man would not do for them. "If we fight, then your brother's life will be in danger. You may have the Biju on your side, but you know what I am capable of," said Hashirama gravely. Madara chuckled. "Now who's being cocky?" asked Madara amusedly. It had always been Hashirama teasing him about the same thing, and now that man was doing the very same thing himself. "I'm serious, Madara." The Uchiha stopped laughing and looked at his friend. There was no doubt in Hashirama's eyes, his face set in stone. "I'd like to take my chances," challenged Madara with a dark grin, "just like fire. I have 3 siblings left, Madara. By the time we are done you'll have none," warned Hashirama, his voice as cold as ice. Madara paled and his eyes widened as he saw an image of Tobirama plunging his sword into Naruto's heart. His brother coughed, his eyes wide in shock and pain. Madara ran to him and caught him in his arms, watching his last brother gurgle painfully before falling silent forever. Time stopped for him as he kept on looking at that pale face of the jovial and sarcastic boy he had loved his entire life. A boy who meant everything to Madara, one who had 2 little girls waiting for him but would never see him again. He was brought out of his thoughts when he felt a gentle hand placed on his shoulder. Dazed, he looked up to see his old friend staring at him with a knowing and sympathetic look in his eyes. "I know how you feel, Madara. Our families have torn each other apart for thousands of years and it will go on until we stop this madness. Don't make peace for me or anyone else either, do it for your brother," urged Hashirama. "My people already declared me Hokage, Hashirama. Do you still want peace after that?" asked Madara skeptically. "I'll admit it will be difficult to make my people accept peace with you as Hokage. But they will accept it," said Hashirama with conviction burning in his eyes. Why? Asked Madara hesitantly. Because I believe in you. Madara looked at this man in disbelief. His throat felt dry, his lips trembled, and his wide eyes could only stare at this man with shock. In him, he saw that young boy with whom he had played stone throwing across the river, the same boy whom he had shared his desire for peace, the same person with whom he had wanted to create a new world where his brother and family would remain safe. What about the leadership of the Land of Fire? Who will replace the daimyo? Asked Madara worriedly. What do you mean? Aren't you supposed to lead now that you are named Hokage? Questioned Hashirama in confusion. Madara sighed. I am not a politician, Hashirama. I am a ninja. Ask me to defend these lands against armies and I will gladly do so. I might even excel every single time, but ask me to discuss trade and politics, and I'll make a spectacle of myself. I rarely compromise or negotiate, I command, explained Madara honestly, and I am too soft-hearted, which might work well in maintaining relations but disastrous when it comes to ruling, admitted Hashirama, receiving a disbelieving look from his friend. The people love you, Hashirama. They'll accept you as their new daimyo and I will support you if you let me be Hokage. I'll keep command over the military forces while you make sure that our lands and people prosper, offered Madara honestly. Your father will never agree to this. Pointed Hashirama worriedly. Both of them became silent as their dilemma hanged over their heads like a sword. They were glad to put their differences aside for the sake of their family, but to make their people not just see reason but accept it was a grave challenge. There were hardliners on both sides who wanted war and would use the first chance to start it. How to arrive at a solution that would be acceptable to all if not welcomed? Hashirama was surprised when Madara smiled a little. What is it? I think I have a solution which will be acceptable to my father. But I might need quite a lot of help from you, said Madara hesitantly. Hashirama gave his friend an unwavering nod as he replied, whatever you need to make this peace. Madara. The large courtroom that once belonged to the Fire Daimyo and his advisors was currently packed with almost every ninja lord of the country. Great and minor clans all were here representing the two most powerful factions of the world. Kurama couldn't even remember the last time there was such a gathering except for the sole purpose of killing each other. On the right side of the large hall sat Tajima Uchiha along with several clan heads representing Namikaze, Shimura, Aburame, Kurama, Yuhi, Hitaki, Yamanaka and several minor ninja clans. Together, they made up the largest military alliance in the elemental nations. On the left side of the large hall sat the tall figure of Hashirama Senju, Tobirama Senju, Itama Senju along with their various allies representing Sarutobi, Inuzuka, Akamichi, and many other minor clans. Together, they were the most wealthiest and influential faction in the world. In the center of the hall were seated the Nara clan head and various former royal army commanders along with Naruto Uchiha. The said boy had decided to sit away from his people considering they were angry at him. To make him not feel alone, both Kurama and Tsunade had joined him much to his surprise. Following their example, the Kinsguard had also taken positions with their leader rather than their faction. It was more of a shouting match and insult trading than any formal negotiations. Old feuds and rivalries could be seen openly with various clan heads trying to insult one another. Tsunade was more than pleased to see her brother released from captivity. At first the Uchihas were reluctant as they wanted to have more leverage. Surprisingly, it was Naori Uchiha who reminded her people that the Senjus had honored their vow to return Dawn and they must honor their side of the bargain. It was not welcomed, but Tsunade had seen the power Naori wielded as she made sure Tobirama was released. It would seem Naruto was not the only Uchiha who really wanted to try for peace because that action had removed some of the bitterness between their factions. It was not much, but it was a start. The arguments were going nowhere and the atmosphere was getting more heated until Naruto got up from his chair. He made sure to release a considerable killing intent that made everyone shut up one after another and look at him. My lords and ladies, all of us are missing the fact that together we overthrew a dynasty that had lasted for centuries. We did it because we were together and we can do more for our lands and people. But not if we try to kill each other rather than work together, urged Naruto, and was not surprised when one of his own bannermen presented his objection to the cause. The daimyo is defeated, our war with the royals is over. We have a Biju that you can command to fight for us and defeat the Senjus once and for all. Fuck the peace? said Tobi Shimura passionately, earning cheerful nods from his allies and curses from the Senjus. Not surprisingly again, it was a Senju ally who gave a befitting reply to that threat. Bring it on, you prick. We have defeated your kind for thousands of years and we'll do it again with Hashirama and his family. Biju or not, we can kick your asses back to the shitty holes you came from. Barked Sasuke Sarutobi, earning loud roars of approval from his side. The main Uchiha and Senju families could only grimly watch as their supporters viciously attacked one another with more and more sharp words. The situation was about to go haywire until Dane Nara stood up. Despite being a former enemy, the Naras were respected as worthy foes by both factions and was the reason as to why everyone became silent and stared at the scarred clan head. Neither side will win if you continue to war. Even if some manage to survive on both sides, by that time the land of fire will be ruined. The civilian population will revolt against your atrocities, and let me remind you, they outnumber us 500 to 1. I don't know about you, but against those many numbers none of my ninjas will survive. Warned Dane seriously. Tsunade was surprised when the man actually got the full attention of not just Hashirama or Madara but that of Tajima Uchiha as well. From what she could see, Dane was not taking any side but only pointing out the outcome if they continued their war now that the daimyo was not there to control the civilian population. Seeing that his audience were paying rapt attention, Dane decided to intensify his efforts to make these fools see reason. Both Uchiha and Senju along with their allies have forgotten their true purpose the Sage of Six Paths wanted you to do. But the Nara remember, said Dane honestly. He looked at the formal royal army commanders and when they all nodded their consent, Dane turned back towards the two factions who now looked very interested in what he had to say. The sage taught us ninchu so that we can maintain peace across the elemental nations and not wage war. The Nara have never allied with either side because you never served the well-being of the people. We chose to serve the daimyo because he at least tried to give peace to all those who couldn't raise their voices against shinobi atrocities. The daimyo may be gone now, but the Nara clan and the former royal army commanders and soldiers are still duty-bound to protect those people, explained Dane loudly for everyone to hear. Neither the Uchiha or the Senju clan heads or as a matter of fact any other ninja clan have any right to claim leadership over people you have never thought about in your entire lives. But there is one person in this room who remembered the duty the sage wanted us to do. Tsunade's eyes widened when she saw not just Dane but all the former civilian army commanders rise from their seats and step before Naruto. The one who cared about the lives of people he didn't even know. The one who chose to do the right thing no matter how hard it was. The one who chose mercy and compassion over brutality. We don't care who he is or what his past was. We don't know what the future holds for us all, but he's our leader from this day till the end of time. The Dragon King, declared Dane proudly. Naruto's heart stopped beating and his face turned extremely pale when Dane and all the civilian army commanders unleashed their swords and knelt before him. Shock rippled through the hall and everyone nearly started panicking but were fortunately stopped when Hashirama got up from his seat, making everyone go silent. Gain. I never thought one day there could be a chance for peace between our two factions. Both sides have done inhuman things to each other in the past, yet I took a chance upon Naruto Uchiha. I trusted that man with not just my family's future but that of this country because I knew he was a good and honorable man. I gave him the hand of my sister in marriage because I knew he has the courage to do the right thing, even if it meant giving his life. That is the kind of man who should not just lead us but this country and world towards the future the sage wanted us to develop. Naruto Uchiha brought an end to this war. He is the young dragon. Hashirama unleashed his sword, pointing it straight at Naruto with pride and conviction in his eyes as he knelt, declaring the words that would be forever remembered in history. The Dragon King. Tajima and Naori along with their allies were hardly able to believe the words Hashirama had just said about Naruto. Most of all, none of them were ever prepared to watch the first Senju in history to willingly kneel before an Uchiha and swear fealty to their rule. Tajima's jaw nearly dropped to the floor as he glanced at Hashirama and saw nothing but pure conviction in his eyes as he made his decision. Majority of the Senju allies were also shocked and moved by their leader's declaration. The Uchiha patriarch glanced at his youngest son who was as pale as ice as he watched not just Hashirama but Dane Nara and all the civilian army commanders still kneeling before him with their swords. He had done the impossible. A boy who was destined to be nothing more than a spare heir had made two of the most ancient and noble clans who had never knelt before the Uchihas to do the impossible thing. No, they are not kneeling to the Uchiha clan. They are kneeling to him. Tajima's lifelong dream was to see the Senjus kneel and accept the Uchiha as their rightful rulers. If they didn't, then he would exterminate them to the last man. It would be costly and devastating, but he had prepared for that his entire life, making alliances and creating the single largest military faction. Yet a boy who had no great social standing, armies, wealth or influence had accomplished a feat Tajima could only dream of. Most of all, he did it with his pure heart. I am your son, father. I am more like you than you think. You're no son of mine. Naori watched as a lone tear fell from Tajima's eyes, even as Madara got up with a determined look in his eyes. Both brothers glanced at each other, one with shock and the other with pride. Am I your brother? Asked Madara simply. Always, whispered Naruto in a choked voice. Naori gave a tearful smile when Madara unleashed his sword and pointed it at his brother with a smile. My sword is yours. Now and always, promised Madara, as he too joined in kneeling beside Hashirama. Kurama could hardly believe the dream of his creator could very well be realized today. It had taken a very long time and could yet again fail as he watched Tajima rise from his chair. The Uchiha leader looked fierce and cold as he looked at his son, but there was also warmth and regret in those cold eyes. I could never fully believe in you, and I will regret that until my last day. A father is supposed to nurture their sons to become great men, but I failed in the task, yet even so you became the man you are today because of your own actions, said Tajima honestly. Naruto got up from his chair and looked at his father. Tajima Uchiha was a proud man, and to admit his mistake in front of all these people was not something to be taken lightly. Most of all, he saw the regret and apology along with pride in those dark eyes. No matter their differences or what people thought of this man, if there was one thing clear to Naruto was the fact that he loved his father. It's all in the past, father, whispered Naruto with a smile, even as his eyes became moist. Tajima nodded in relief as he got the message before he steeled himself and not just looked at his own bannermen but those of the Senjus as well. He cast one last glance at his sister, who stared at him with tearful eyes as she gave him a proud nod. I can never truly believe in any of these people. But I can believe in my sons. The future is uncertain for us all. However, the Uchiha clan shall devote itself to the well-being of this country as we have for thousands of years, pledged Tajima fiercely. Every person watched in pure shock as Tajima unleashed his sword before locking his eyes firmly with his youngest son. And I will stand behind my son. Silence reigned across the hall as the Uchiha clan head knelt side by side with Madara and Hashirama beside him. Kurama could only watch with an overjoyed heart as the three most powerful men in the world yelled in one voice. The Dragon King. Naruto could only watch in awe and shock as every ninja lord from both factions rose up and unleashed their swords. Together, they all knelt before him as one single call was declared for the first time in history of the elemental nations. The Dragon King. The Dragon King. The Dragon King. The declarations were getting louder and more passionate with every passing second as every person in the room took a leap of faith. In their eyes there was hope for a better future, and they were entrusting him with it. Suddenly, he felt overwhelmed by this new mantle, but as he glanced at Tsunade, she gave him a supportive smile. Most of all, he saw belief in her eyes for him. A lone tear fell from his eyes as he saw Kurama smile before the beast also knelt and joined all the ninja lords, proclaiming Naruto as his leader. The Biju's lifelong dream finally realized after thousands of years. In a way, history had unknowingly corrected a wrong done thousands of years ago. Even though every ninja lord declared for Naruto, it didn't change the fact that he was Indra's descendant. Through this declaration, the dragons had achieved their lifelong dream of making the Senjus submit. At the same time, the Senjus had managed to not only secure peace for themselves but also managed to make themselves vital to the success of this new regime through the marriage of Tsunade to the Dragon King. Through her, the sons of Ashura would always play a vital role in the ruling of the elemental nations, even if they officially didn't have one of their own as the supreme leader. Tsunade widely smiled as she watched all the ninja lords still proclaiming her future husband as their king. Not only did she feel happy for Naruto but for herself as well, because the war was finally over, and if things worked out then soon she would no longer be a princess in name but an actual queen herself. She looked at Naruto and saw he was still trying to accept what was happening before his eyes. For one who had no claim to power, he was now perhaps the most powerful leader in history after the Sage of Six Paths. However, her smile faltered as she caught a pair of eyes that were full of resentment and bitterness. Even as all the ninja lords were making their declaration clear again and again, Tsunade didn't miss several bitter people flocking around that one person who was glaring at Naruto murderously. His lips said the words, but the tone of his voice left little to imagination about his feelings towards his new leader, the Dragon King. And that concludes part 3 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed Fire and Blood, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Black Wolf 501, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.